the pledge.
You all face the flag, put your hand over your heart, and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, thank you much. Madam Secretary, if we could have the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. President. Division 7, Gary Van Dam.
Here.
Division 6, Audrey Miller. Here. Division 5, Robert Paris.
Here.
Division 2, Keith Dias.
Here.
Division 1, Drew Mercy.
Here.
Division 3, Frank Donato.
Here.
Division 4, George Lane.
Here.
General Manager Knutson.
Here.
General Counsel Markman.
Here.
And Holly Hughes present.
Well, I never see you come in. I don't know how you didn't see you.
I've been here a long time, George.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, thank you, Madam Secretary. Next item, item number 4, voluntary public roll call. We're always happy to hear those that maybe joining us by telephone or listening in. So we'd already appreciate the hearing who's with us this evening.
John Yucas said, Mutual Group.
John, welcome.
Thank you.
Vincentino, Palmdale Water District.
Again, welcome. Glad you're with us.
White Fence 3, Jack Stephens.
Hey, Jack. Welcome.
Thank you.
Kathy McLaren, Palmdale Water District.
Hey, Kathy. Glad to hear from you.
John Joy, Sackton, Nawadosi News.
John, you're welcome. Yeah. Appreciate everybody listening in. Next,
Brent Brown, Port Water District.
you're welcome. Okay, if that's it, we'll move on to item number 5. Public comments. Period open to the public. So if anyone is listening in or in the audience would like to address the board that an item is not further on the agenda, this is a good time to do it. Item number 6, adoption of agenda, 6A1. So I think we've all had a chance to look at our agenda, and the motion would be in order.
Mr. President, I'll move on 6A1.
Mr. Miller, thank you.
Mr. President, I'll second that motion.
Yeah. Director Paris, yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have a motion and second. If there's no further discussion, Secretary, we can have a roll call.
Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Robert Paris.
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes.
Drew Mercy.
Yes.
Frank Donato.
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. The motion carried. Thank you. That'll bring us to item number 7, consent calendar. We have 2 items. Approval of the minutes of December 27th and the special board meeting in the minutes of January 9th. So motion would be in order.
Mr. President, I'll move on 7A1.
Director Miller, you keep things going.
Second, Gary Van Dam.
Second by Director Van Dam. If there's no further discussion or questions on that, Secretary, we're going to have a roll call.
Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Robert Paris.
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes.
Drew Mercy.
Yes.
Frank Donato.
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. We move on to item number 8. We're going to have a presentation. This is regarding the State Water Project and Delta Conveyance. We have 2 representatives that are going to be making a presentation this evening, and Matt will turn that over to you to introduce our guest or speaker.
All right. Thank you, President Lane, and good evening, board. Before I introduce our speakers this evening on the proposed Delta Conveyance Project, I wanted to just say a few words. So staff has invited the representatives from the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority and Department of Water Resources this evening to provide an informational only presentation on the technical aspects and the current status of the proposed Delta Conveyance Project. This is the first of several discussions, presentations, and affordability analysis review meetings we have planned with the board over the next several months. The intent of these discussions is to ensure that the full board has a thorough understanding of the proposed Delta Conveyance project, AVAC's long-term water supply outlook, both with and without the proposed Delta Conveyance project, and the affordability and financial impact to AVAC's existing taxpayers and ratepayers. This is an important decision before any final decisions are made with respect to AVAC's participation in the project. So, throughout 2024, we plan to have several workshops, discussions with the board, discussing the pros and the cons related to the Delta Conveyance project, what impact that has on AVAC's future water supplies, both participation and non-participation in the project. We'll also learn more about the project throughout the year. Mid-year, we should receive updated construction cost and benefit analysis from the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority. And AVAC's next decision on participation in the project would come in the fall of 2024. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carrie Buckman, who's going to start with the presentation. She also has Graham Brad, who is the Executive Director for the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority.
Thank you, Matt. Good synopsis. And welcome. Are you visiting us from Sacramento?
I am, yes. I'm Carrie Buckman. I'm the Environmental Program Manager for Delta Conveyance at DWR. So I'm here from Sacramento, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you. Thank you for having us. I think it's really, really nice to be able to interact in person again, and I really appreciate that opportunity.
Great.
Okay, so tonight we're going to talk a little bit. I'll start off with a little bit of why DWR is considering the Delta Conveyance project. Graham will talk a bit more about what it is and what's included, and then I'll talk a little bit more about planning and permitting next steps. So first, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why the State Water Project is so important to the state, and DWR is the owner and operator of that project. 3 out of 5 Californians depend on water that flows through the Delta. About 2/3 of California's water originates in the Sierra Nevadas, and 50% of those water supplies flow through the Delta. There are 29 state water contractors, including AVAC, that purchase and distribute water from the State Water Project. So it provides water, clean, safe, affordable drinking water to 27 million people, and also helps irrigate 750,000 acres of farmland. And one other thing to note, towards the end of 2023, we released an economic report on the State Water Project, and it's really interesting the economic engine that the State Water Project drives. So I think people have probably heard the statistic that if California was its own nation, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world. And if the State Water Project service area was its own nation, it would be the 8th largest economy in the world. So this is a really important resource to a really large area. And we also recognize the importance of the State Water Project to the contractors, including AVAC, with a population of about 500,000 people. And this is as a supply for a wholesale retailer. And we also recognize that it's not just important to receive the table A and the direct delivery supplies, but also the ability of AVAC to take high flows and excess flows when they're available for storage is a really important water resource. So the reason that we're really looking at the Delta Conveyance project is to help us prepare for weather whiplash. And this is something we've seen in the past few years pretty clearly. We had 2 incredibly dry years, one of them a record-setting dry year, followed by an incredibly wet year with really extreme events. And we recognize that we cannot wait. We have to adapt to the situation. We have to plan for it. And there's definitely some variability in what we might be facing. Different projections show a decrease in precipitation of about 32% to an increase of 47%. But there are some trends that we've seen already that we do expect to continue, including more precipitation falling as rain instead of snow in the winter months, more extreme drought and flood cycles like what we've seen in the last few years, flashier storms, so these pockets of intense precipitation scattered within drier periods. And the issue is that the way that this flow will change, really including the high flows during winter, cannot be captured and moved with our existing infrastructure. So talking a little bit more about what this means for water management, our water management system is really developed based on older flow patterns. So with more snow and snow falling in the mountains during the winter, that really formed a snowpack that was a storage facility essentially for the State Water Project. So during the winter, there was stream flow in the Sacramento Valley from rain falling in the valley, and then the snowpack melted and provided a stable stream flow into the spring. And we know that's not happening anymore, and it's changing as we move forward. So we're looking at having a different flow regime where we receive more of that flow in the winter when we have limits on our ability to store and divert that flow. So storage facilities are limited because we do have flood protection requirements. So we need to leave a certain amount of storage vacant in case there is a big flood event that we have room to capture that water. And in the Delta, there are water quality and fish requirements in the South Delta that at times can limit our diversions. So adding a point of diversion with the Delta Conveyance Project could help those situations. We want to try to address these concerns that would see the State Water Project supplies decline into the future. Additionally, we are very aware of the earthquake risk that's faced in the Delta. There is a 72% chance of a 6.7 or greater magnitude earthquake in the Bay Area by 2043. If there was an earthquake in the Delta levees are somewhat precarious in some places. And if those levees were to be damaged or fail, there would be salinity intrusion from the bay, and we could have an outage of the State Water Project pumps from a period of several months to over a year. And we need to be prepared for that as well. So how would the Delta Conveyance Project help? The idea of the Delta Conveyance Project is that we would add intakes in the North Delta to allow the capture of water that's available during high flow periods and move that water to storage. And that would allow diversions during times that flows are very high, so we could divert those flows without adversely affecting water quality or species. And it would help guard against these declining baseline supplies of the State Water Project, which was really a great concern for us. So modernizing this infrastructure would also help protect against seismic risk and sea level rise so that we can capture, move, and store water when it's available. And this slide shows that declining baseline that I've been talking about. So if you look at the blue line on the figure, that shows what happens without the Delta Conveyance Project. So moving forward from now into the future, we expect the State Water Project baseline supplies to continue to decline because of a combination of factors that we've been discussing. And the idea is that the Delta Conveyance Project would add an increment of water to protect against that declining supply so that the supplies would be able to be stable and protected moving into the future. And the Delta Conveyance Project would yield about 500,000 acre-feet of water per year on an average basis, which is about enough for 5.2 million people. And just to add a little bit, I know that we talk a lot about modeling results and simulations, but one of the things that we've done in the past couple of years is we've run some calculations of what would have happened in these years if the Delta Conveyance Project were operational. So in 21-22, that water year was a critically dry year, but we had record-setting storms in October and December. In October, we had about 5 inches of rain fall in 24 hours. And if we had been able to capture water during and immediately after those events when the flows were very high, we would have increased diversions by about 236,000 acre-feet of water, which is enough for about 2.5 million people for a year, or nearly 850,000 households per year. And if you think in terms of State Water Project allocations, that's about a 5% State Water Project allocation. And during an incredibly dry or critically dry year, that would have been really valuable. Last year, during January of 2023, I'm not sure if people remember, but there was a very wet system that came through, multiple wet systems that caused quite a bit of flooding in Northern California. And we were pretty limited on our ability to capture that in the South Delta because of fishery requirements and restrictions. So adding a second point of diversion would have allowed us to capture some of those very high flows So we would have been able to capture about 228,000 acre feet of water. So I'm going to hand it over to Graham.
Thank you, Carrie. Good evening, directors. I too really appreciate the opportunity to come down and meet with you in person and talk about the project. So first, to just talk about the Delta Conveyance project, what it consists of, we're talking about the Bethany alignment as the preferred project identified by the Department of Water Resources and the certified CEQA documentation. It's a 6,000 cubic foot per second project. That would be 2 intakes in the North Delta along the main stem of the Sacramento River. A series of shafts that would connect a tunnel down to a new pumping plant in the South Delta, adjacent to the federal facilities down there. That would provide a completely unique and independent connection to Bethany Reservoir, which is the head of the California Aqueduct. So there's a couple of other statistics as we look at the graphic on the right-hand side. It's, as I mentioned, 2 intakes in the north, each intake up to 3,000 cubic feet per second. It's a single tunnel over a distance of about 45 miles, kind of skirting along the eastern margins of the Delta, and we'll talk about why that's important here in a minute. It's a 36-foot internal diameter tunnel, segmental concrete lined, depths ranging between 140 and 170 feet. Each of those concrete segments would be on the order of 18 inches thick. In terms of tunnel shafts, we have 2 launch shafts, 6 maintenance shafts that are used to help construct the tunnel and then are repurposed in a couple of instances, 1 for an intake drop shaft, and then we have 3 reception shafts to receive the tunnel boring machine, 2 of which are repurposed into, one as an intake drop shaft and the other as the outlet at the pumping plant. So in terms of those major project components, just showing a couple of graphics to help provide some additional context. The intakes in the north are purely gravity fed, so there are no pumping facilities in the North Delta. There will be a number of shafts working their way down the eastern margins of the Delta, really mainly needed to construct the tunnel, but then also to provide surge mitigation and future access for operations and maintenance. That tunnel will be constructed over the distance to connect those intakes in the North Delta to the new pumping plant in the south, and then a series of pipelines and a new discharge structure on the rim of Bethany Reservoir to discharge that water. So a few advantages of the Bethany alignment. First, starting in the north at the intake locations, we have identified the use of cylindrical T-screens, which are much more efficient in terms of how much space they take in order to manage the intake velocities. They also have a much more efficient and capable cleaning system within them, so they just make for an overall smaller footprint and quieter, more efficient system. We're able to construct this project from only 2 tunnel launch locations, which is a significant advantage. There's a lot of infrastructure and activity at those launch locations. The plan would be to use each of these locations as a double launch. So 1 tunnel would launch to the north, for instance, at that north location, launch towards the intakes, and then a second tunnel boring machine would launch and excavate towards the reception shaft down in the middle of Highway 12. The same condition would occur down Lower Roberts Island, where you'd have 1 launch into the north and 1 launch into the south. So the entire 45 miles will be constructed from 2 launch locations, which significantly helps in terms of construction activity and logistics. The traffic focus for construction of the project is on major interstates and highways and exclusive haul roads. A couple of other advantages with these launch locations is that they are adjacent to infrastructure that can handle what would be necessary to construct a project of this magnitude. That northern location is right next to Interstate 5, as well as a railroad connection immediately on the other side of the site. The lower launch location is right next to the Port of Stockton, which has a lot of large cargo and movement infrastructure, a lot of rail line connections, and then major interstates and highways also nearby. So that really helps to focus those activities on roads that can handle it. The tunnel route completely avoids the heart of the Delta, which is another key advantage. Although that route is a little bit longer, swinging around the eastern side, it avoids a lot of the logistical challenges and geotechnical challenges that would definitely potentially hinder the project through a more central route. There's a heavy reliance on buried conduit for new power lines, so where we have to construct new power, which we need for the tunnel boring machines as well as the pumping plant. If there's not already lines hanging on poles that we can add to, we're going to bury all that line so that we're not having impacts to migratory patterns. The project would result in a fully independent connection to the existing state water project facilities at Bethany Reservoir. This would provide the state operators ultimate flexibility in terms of continuing to divert in those South Delta facilities, which also discharge into Bethany Reservoir through the Banks pumping plant, and then discharging through the new intakes in the north through an entirely separate facility. Those new facilities avoid having to construct any new forebays or barge landings, which has a really dramatic reduction in terms of impacts to wetlands and waters reservoir. The facilities are all designed to be protected from future extreme hydrology. So this includes the pumping plant itself being on higher ground, which is around elevation 50. A lot of elevations in the Delta are below sea level and ultimately under significant threat related to sea level rise and other extreme hydrology. So having that pumping plant on higher ground provides a lot of security in terms of future operations. The intakes are designed to fully contain 2,100-year hydrology. So this is a future climate change hydrology as well as sea level rise. So that future hydrology would be fully contained within the intake system, and the shafts themselves are also sited and elevated above that elevation to ensure that any future diversions under extreme conditions would be fully contained within the system. In terms of seismic resiliency, first, the new facilities would be designed based on the latest understanding of seismicity in the region. It is a constantly evolving science, and there's a lot to still incorporate and be considered. The facilities that we've identified for the project are designed to continue operation following what's called a maximum design earthquake, an extreme and rare event. For the tunnels and shafts, which would be more difficult to repair after an event, they're designed for almost a 2,500 return period shake. The intakes, embankments, aqueducts, bridges, so all of the surface facilities that are easier to access and deal with any maintenance type repairs are designed for nearly 1,000-year return period event. The pumping plant has its own unique criteria because of the facility, but also designed for a very extreme and rare event. Some other advantages of the project in general related to seismic resiliency, tunnels would be below the depth of anticipated liquefaction. So all of those surface impacts that we talk about in terms of shaking levees and weak unconsolidated superficial soils would all be above the depth of the tunnel. Tunnels are intrinsically safer. They're not subject to the amplification effects that you can have when you have a seismic event down in a rock surface, and that wave passes through the loose saturated materials that can start to amplify and swing bridges and other structures at the surface. The tunnels are not subject to that amplification at depth. Also, the soil confinement improves the performance of the system relative to structures built on the surface. And then lastly, if there are, in some instances, needs to cross known faults, we can manage that through specific design elements, beginning with reinforcement of the concrete lining. There can be also even additional reinforcement added through certain stretches by adding steel plates and a number of other elements, or there can be flexible crossings included in the project. So there's a lot of seismic benefits associated with a tunnel type project. So one of the big items that we're working on and will be of a lot of interest, I know, is the cost estimate. The latest cost assessment was released back in 2020. That was $15.9 billion in 2020 dollars. We are working on a new estimate now for the recommended project from the EIR. This is a pretty intensive exercise. We're taking every element of that cost estimate, really working it through and ensuring that we've done everything we can, and we'll be fully able to defend every piece of this estimate, starting first with updating the design and footprint for the preferred project, incorporating any modifications to the project through the permitting processes to date, updating all of the contingencies and risk mitigation costs based on a much better understanding of potential risks associated with the project. We've now been working on an optimized schedule that allows us to have a much more accurate bottoms-up estimate of all the soft costs associated with the project. We're updating property and right-of-way costs, as well as the environmental mitigation conceptual designs that were identified through the permit processing. So all of these will be incorporated into the new cost estimate. We're intending to release this estimate in Q2 of this year, so here in just a couple of months, along with the updated benefit cost analysis that will take those costs into account. Additionally, we're continuing to look at potential cost-saving concepts. So this is taking in, we've been doing a lot of work to collect subsurface conditions, data around subsurface conditions throughout the Delta. We know the assumptions that we use, which were appropriately conservative for the environmental document. But now, as we continue to collect this information, we're going to be looking for, and we'll continue to look for opportunities to improve constructability, refine those design assumptions, and also leave room for industry innovation. And it's our plan to provide some additional context around these potential cost-saving concepts as we work our way towards the cost estimate. And then just as a flag at the bottom of the note, all of this, it does help to put it in the context of the entire statewide needs for the state water project, which Carrie mentioned was published by the state in December of 2023. So in terms of the design development at the DCA, we're working this year also on the project engineering report. This will be just a succinct deliverable to document all of the engineering considerations associated with the Bethany Reservoir alternative. There were a number of alternatives in the CEQA document evaluated in the EIR, so we just need to pare this down to the single project and make sure that it's coherent and understandable and useful for the future. That will be really the last major engineering deliverable associated with the current scope of work that we've been working on. The next phase activities that we're starting to turn our sights toward would be to advance the design for the preferred project from a concept level to something approaching preliminary design. In order to do that, we need to collect a lot of geotechnical and environmental data to better understand subsurface conditions. There's a lot of survey information that we need: ground survey, aerial, geophysical survey. There's a lot of property access, land acquisition activities. Then we are starting to, through our scheduling work and mapping out these design activities, considering the procurements associated with the feature design teams that will be necessary to advance the project. And then it's certainly possible that, depending on the trajectory of the program, there may be some elements of the environmental mitigation that will start to approach the implementation phase. So with that, I will hand it back to Carrie.
I wanted to touch on the community engagement that we've been conducting throughout the development of the project. We've really focused on environmental justice and disadvantaged communities outreach. We consulted with statewide experts to develop a set of best practices, and we've been implementing that to really try to help inform and engage the disadvantaged communities in the Delta. We've had a formal consultation process with tribes, as well as an informal coordination process to develop an impact analysis for tribal cultural resources and identify mitigation. We had a Delta community engagement group that was known as the Stakeholder Engagement Committee that the DCA organized to help provide input during the conceptual design process, so that we really tried to even design the project to reduce effects to the local communities and the environment. And then during the environmental analysis, we identified additional ways to reduce those effects. We've been developing a community benefits program for Delta communities, and we've had an extensive overall outreach program. We've really tried to develop many different ways for people to engage, because we know one way doesn't fit for everyone. So a little bit about the CEQA process. I think people probably heard that we had a pretty big milestone in December. So we did issue the final environmental impact report, or EIR, in December, and we certified that on December 21st. So that was the culmination of a fairly long process. It started in 2020. We issued the draft EIR in 2022 for a 142-day comment period. We received about 730 letters and other communications. And that, when subdivided into different topics, was about 7,300 individual comments. So we responded to all of those substantive comments in the final EIR, which included a range of policy and environmental topics. So next steps, this is a major milestone, but it is not the end. So as part of this, DWR made a decision to move forward, but there's still quite a bit of planning and permitting to work through. So our next steps, for the National Environmental Policy Act, the Corps of Engineers is the lead agency, and they're looking at early to mid-2024 to finish their environmental impact statement. We are engaging in formal consultation under both the state and federal Endangered Species Acts. We're working to submit a petition to change our point of diversion of our water rights for the State Water Resources Control Board. We are not getting additional water rights, but just changing where we would divert that water. We're continuing to work with communities to develop the community benefits program. As Graham mentioned, there is financial work to develop the cost estimate and benefit cost analysis, and we will continue public outreach and engagement throughout. And just as sort of our last slide here, we wanted to highlight some of the things that are coming up this year. It's a pretty busy year on the program. And so we wanted to just share some of the things that are going on. So starting even before this year, in the end of 2023, we did release the statewide SWP economic study, which isn't really directly relevant to Delta Conveyance, but does help drive home the reason that we're considering this, that as owners and operators of the State Water Project, we recognize its importance and we can't allow it to decline. We also issued the final EIR and the notice of determination on the project. So we finished the CEQA process at the end of 23. So moving into 2024, we are working on our change of point of diversion petition to the state board. We're looking to submit that soon. And then in Q2, we'll be looking at the updated cost estimate and cost benefit analysis that Graham discussed. Moving into Q3, we'll have workshops on the community benefit program. We're also looking to finish our formal consultation process on the Endangered Species Act and California Endangered Species Act, the final environmental impact statement with the Corps, and start our hearing on the water rights change in point of diversion. The last thing on here is the preferred project engineers report, which Graham discussed to document what the preferred project would look like. So with all of that, I think we are open for questions if you would like to ask any.
You're both very effective speakers and easy to follow. Is it open to the board now for any questions and comments?
Director Miller, nice to meet you. So how many miles long is the tunnel?
45 miles.
45 miles. And are you acquiring the property where the tunnel is going to be? Or are you getting easement underneath? How deep is it?
So the idea there would not be a need to acquire the land over the tunnel. There would be a need to permanently restrict activities on top of the land so that no one could drill a well or something like that might damage the tunnel. But much of the region is agricultural, and there's no reason that agriculture would not continue to operate through those easements. It would just be a limitation on what could happen in the future.
How deep is the tunnel underground?
It's about 150 feet. Yeah.
And then the Bethany Reservoir that you want to put in, what's the proximity to like San Luis or what we're used to?
So Bethany Reservoir exists now. It's part of the State Water Project. It's not a large reservoir compared to San Luis. I mean, I think it's on the order of maybe 25,000 acre feet, but I think that's a loose recollection. It's really a wide spot in the California aqueduct. It also has the South Bay pumping plant connection to it. So that's where the South Bay aqueduct portion of the State Water Project lifts and takes off towards the Bay Area. It's the current discharge location of the Banks pumping plant, which is the State Water Project plant now that lifts water out of Clifton Court, puts it into Bethany Reservoir, and then it flows south from there.
It sounds like San Luis is south.
It is, sorry, yes, I was thinking size, but yeah, San Luis is south of there.
Okay.
Anything you want to add, Carrie, State Water Project? Okay.
Yeah, I think you addressed all my questions. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I have a comment. I've studied this quite a bit over the years when it was twin tunnels and now down to the single tunnel. My only comment I would like to make is that under what is proposed, under the 27 contractors could not handle something like this. This should be a statewide initiative when it comes to that direction, because it's going to benefit the entire state, not just the 27 contractors. So I just want to throw that into the equation. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
I have anything else?
I have a quick question, George. Do we have any estimated time for breaking ground for this project?
I think that's still up in the air. It depends on the trajectory that we continue on. I think ideally we'd be breaking ground around 2030.
2030. Okay.
Yeah, I had a comment. In light of California losing population, decreasing, and this was originally planned, the population is increasing. Is the state giving that any consideration? That's one, question. The second question, you spent one hell of a lot of money already. In most projects, you go through a financial analysis, and our family's been involved, of course, in development for a number of years, and you don't go this far without doing a financial analysis. And it seemed like you went a long ways, and still trying to figure out the cost. Those two questions.
Yeah, so I think the first is in terms of California's overall water strategy. When Governor Newsom came into office, he did develop a water resilience portfolio, and the idea was looking at how California's population is changing, water patterns, both demands and supplies, and where the needs are, all of the different issues that need to be addressed. And so that did identify that there is no one way to address California's water problems, that there is a suite of actions needed, a portfolio. That did have an update in the last few years where it did specifically mention Delta conveyance as something that will be helpful to address the issues for California moving forward. And then the second issue about the timing of the cost.
I don't know if you quite answered my question. We've lost several 100,000, people in the last 3 or 4 years. If that trend continues, is the state considering that?
So largely, we've been doing our projections based on the Department of Economics, I think, and it's depending on what they think is happening in the future. So yes, there have been changes in the past few years, but those have been driven by fairly specific circumstances around COVID. So I don't know that that's projected going forward, but we are using their projections.
Yeah, what are the projections?
I don't know offhand, but we can follow up.
Would that not be important?
So I think that what we're trying to do is stabilize the state water project because of its importance to the areas that receive it. So that is certainly driven by the number of people within those areas, but by many, many factors. So we're really looking at a suite of things that are causing the need for the project.
If we lose 10% of our population, would that be significant?
I would have to look into it, yeah. But I think that is, I don't believe that is the forecast, but we can certainly look into it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got another question, comment. It might be helpful to review how that water is coming down the river right now to the Delta. There might be people listening in who don't understand like where the state water project actually starts with the aqueduct versus Sacramento River, the Delta, and why coming underneath all that. That might be cool to hear. Because what I'm understanding is you're trying to capture more precipitation that's in the river and bypass everything and bring it down to the project, the current.
Yes. So right now, it would probably be helpful if I had a full state water project figure, which I don't have. But the state water project has a number of features, including Oroville Reservoir on the Feather River. And then the water enters the Delta and is diverted in the South Delta. And so you can see on this figure, let me see, I think I can point. Nope. I should be able to. So yeah, right where it says existing South Delta exports, there is also a body of water there. That is Clifton Port Forebay. So that is where the diversions start for the state water project. That currently water enters Clifton Court Forebay on high tide, and it is diverted and pumped through the Banks pumping plant to the California Aqueduct. The idea of this facility would be that it would add a point of diversion. It would not replace that existing location, but add a point in the North Delta. And the North Delta has very different conditions in a number of ways. So we would be diverting from the Sacramento River during times that flows are higher. So some of the concerns about how water travels through the Delta, you can see here that for water from the Sacramento River system, which includes the Feather River, to get to the South Delta, it flows south through the Delta, where the Delta is typically a water body that water is moving to the west. So it gets a little more complicated when we're pulling water to the south. So adding a point of diversion in the north gives flexibility for operations and allows us to capture those higher flows. Did that answer the questions that you were thinking about?
Yeah, more on the northern side just for people to understand that water flows. And you have controls, but not if it's raining in torrents, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. So generally, the delta has two conditions. One of them we call excess conditions and one we call balanced conditions. So balanced conditions are generally what I would say are when the water entering the delta is under control. So it's when there's water released from upstream storage in order to meet users' needs in the delta, as well as delta outflow requirements. So it's balanced. What's coming in is what's needed, essentially. But during other times of the year, we have what are called excess conditions, and that's when there's more water in the system that is not controlled. And so that's typically during the winter when we have storm systems coming through. And that's the flow that we're looking to divert, those flows that are coming in now that are not able to be captured upstream in storage or within the delta by our existing facilities.
And where do those excess flows go?
To the San Francisco Bay and then to the ocean. Mm-hmm.
Out of the system.
Out of the system.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, within that 45 miles, is there turnouts for the farmers, or where do they get their water from?
The project as designed does not include turnouts along the system. It would generally require pumping plants at each of those locations. Although I will comment, I mean, I guess Contra Costa is one exception to that. We do have an arrangement with Contra Costa Water District to install a pumping plant at one of the shaft locations down here in the south. So this is at Union Island right here. It would be an actual pumping plant installed in that shaft and a connection to their existing facilities so that when opportunities arise, they would be able to use capacity within the tunnel to move their own flows. But in general, there are not turnouts along the system.
Yeah, I think just to add to that a little bit, the idea right now is that the supplies are focused on the State Water Project. So it is really downstream from banks where we're supplying water. That said, I think we're really open to expanding that if there are interested parties in the future. So that's something where we do have a mechanism, as Graham outlined, that we've explored in Contra Costa. At the moment, there aren't interested parties in the Delta that would like to participate in the project, but we are always open to discussions.
Okay, if there's nothing, further, we appreciate your attendance, and anyway, it was a good presentation from both of them.
Thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity to come. Thank you.
Thank you much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
President Lane, I don't know if it's appropriate, but maybe see if there's anybody on the phone that has a comment.
It's appropriate. Is there anybody listening who would like to have some questions or address the speakers? Okay, we're moving on to item number B, Finance Committee. Our chairman is Director Donato, which will move over.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Oh, hang on a second. There was somebody with their hand up.
Okay, excuse me.
Oh, my apologies. Is it okay to start my comment now?
Please state your name.
My name's Kyle Griffith. I'm making a comment on behalf of Californians for Water Security. We're the statewide coalition that's advocating in support of the Delta Conveyance Project.
Yes, we'd like to hear from you.
Excellent. I just wanted to, provide a brief comment today. As part of the environmental impact report process, our coalition submitted a letter of support signed by nearly 40 organizations, including labor unions, businesses, local governments, and taxpayers, including Kern County Taxpayers Association, in support of this project. Our coalition feels that it is a vital piece of California's climate adaptation strategy and ensuring the reliability of water deliveries throughout the state. This version of the project is very different from previous versions. As Carrie and Grant demonstrated, it has been downsized, refined, rerouted, and redesigned to be the best possible project to protect California's water security. Our coalition has conducted some polling over the summer and found that across regions and across demographics, this project is supported because it's a vital infrastructure upgrade. We're really looking forward to working with AVEX Board and other water agencies as they take it through the permitting process, and appreciate you guys taking the time to consider. Thank you.
We appreciate your comments, and anything you would like to send AVAC regarding the letters or we would appreciate it. Okay, thank you much. Is there anybody else who would like to address the board? Okay. Director Donato?
Okay, thank you. We'll try this again. Okay. AP1, consider and possible action to accept and file the check registry list, the period of December 28th, 23 through January 10th, 2024, and it's in your agenda on page 85. And Matt, you're going to give us a little.
Yeah, I can give a brief overview. Thank you, Director Lane. So the Finance Committee went through the checklist in detail. This was last Thursday, our regular meeting. There were a couple items that jumped out. The first item on the first page, payment to DWR, about $7.1 million. This is part of our statement of charges or fixed cost on the state water project. And just a reminder, our typical monthly payment is about $1.6 million, but we do pay two large payments a year, one in January and the other in July. So that's why this month is high at $7.1 million. We went through the various credit card statements for the agency managers or department managers. And on page 3 or page 88 of your board packet, item 55 is our annual payment to the Nickel family. That's associated with the 1,700 acre feet of nickel water supply. That is reimbursed by San Gregorio Pass Water Agency. And those were kind of the highlights of what was discussed with the committee, but we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any comments or questions?
I'll make a motion then on 8B1 that we approve the check registry.
We have a motion by Director Nall. Do we have a second? Director Parrish, we have a second. If there's no further discussion or comments, Madam Secretary, we get a roll call.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried.
Okay, that brings us to 8B2, consideration of possible action to accept and file the treasurer's report for the month ending December 31st, 23. And our finance manager, Teresa, is here in person to address it.
Thank you. Good evening, directors. This is the treasurer's report for December. And average yield to maturity for the total portfolio for December was 4.068%, which was up 0.018% from the prior month. Average days to maturity for the total portfolio was 219 days, or approximately 7 months. And total cash and investments at December 31st was $135.6 million, which was up $11 million from November. The reason for the increase was the property taxes that were received in December of about $15 million. We received the majority of the property taxes in December and April. So we always look during those months and compare it to what we received in the prior year. So if we can go to that slide, Holly, please. Thank you. Okay, so what this is showing in the first column is what has been received the current fiscal year to date. So July 1st through December 31st. The second column is that same time period in the prior fiscal year. And so you can see for LA County, so far for this fiscal year, we've received $304,000 more than the prior year, $1.4 million from Kern County. So the total increase is about 8.5% over the prior year. So we'll look at it again in April and see.
Can you hang on a second?
Yeah.
So I want to throw something out there. So in our district, our agency, the appreciation of housing went up about, from the assessor's point of view, 8.5%. between the two areas. And that seems like we're looking at probably another 5% this year, the way this is going, because of the inflation situation we've had the last 2 years. And it's great. It's amazing. It's good, but it's also tough for the new people trying to buy houses and stuff like that. So, thank you, Teresa.
Okay. One more thing, Richard with PFM will be here at the February 13th meeting to provide his quarterly report.
Okay, any questions for Teresa? Teresa, you do a good job. Keep up the good work.
That's right.
Thank you.
Keep us. Okay, I'll make a motion on item AP2 that consider possible action to accept the treasury report the month ending December 31st, 2023.
I'll second the motion. This is Keith.
We have a second by Director Dias. There's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary?
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. Thank you, Director Donato. Then we'll move on to the next item, the Personnel Legal Committee, and the chairman of that is Rob Paris.
And I'll turn this over to Patty. Go ahead. Our HR manager.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Okay, this one, you have it in your packet. It's the new reproductive loss leave. It's a statutory law that was signed October 11th and went into effect as of January 1st. This leave allows for up to 5 days of unpaid leave when there's a reproductive loss is suffered by one of our employees. The reproductive loss includes failed adoption, failed surrogacy, miscarriage, stillbirth, or an unsuccessful assisted reproduction. The employees may use sick leave or vacation time to cover the time off, and they cannot take more than 20 days in a 12-month period. The policy was reviewed by Rebecca Green in Mr. Markman's office and also by our Personnel Committee. Any questions?
Okay, there's no further questions. It's a state law that we're following.
It's a state law. It's a statutory law, yes.
Okay, so the motion would be in order.
And Mr. President, I'll move approval of Board Order 8C1.
Director Parrish, we have a motion.
Director Miller will second that motion.
We have a second by Director Miller. There's no further questions or comments, Madam Secretary?
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
Thanks, Patty. Good job.
Move on to item number D, the Watermaster and Groundwater Committee. And that is, chairman is Rob Paris. Rob, will turn it over to you.
And I'll turn it over to Matt.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Director Paris. Good evening again. So you may recall each year, maybe sometimes twice a year, the Watermaster requests replacement water from the Antelope Valley State Water Contractors Association. And the state water contractors of AVAC, Palmdale Water District, and Little Rock Creek Irrigation District review that request from the Watermaster and establish a plan in providing the replacement water at the request of the Watermaster. So we've got a little presentation here. So included in your board packet is a staff report, and then handed out this evening is a copy of the resolution. Typical resolution that we've approved in the past, and the purpose is to document and put on the record with the AVAC board that AVAC is releasing water from our banked supplies in lieu of cash payment from the Watermaster for providing that replacement water. So it's a paper transfer. We document in our bank supplies the release of that water, and it goes to the basin where nobody can pump that water in the future. So you can see on the top left, it's a table showing that the Watermaster received a total amount of $378,189 from pumpers within the adjudication that pumped above and beyond their production right. So those funds have been received by the Watermaster, and that is for a total of about 633 acre feet over the last, 12-month period. And on the top left chart, you can also see the breakdown of where that overproduction occurred and which state water contractor agency is responsible for providing the replacement water. So based on the breakdown of where the overproduction occurred, AVAC is providing 454.2 acre feet of that 633 acre feet total. The other two agencies are making up the difference. And in exchange for providing the 454.2 acre feet from AVAC's bank supplies, we agreed to receive a payment of $277,612.60. So that's the purpose of the resolution. It documents that transaction and allows us to receive the payment. This item will also be on the Watermaster's agenda tomorrow to approve the plan being proposed here in the top left. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. That's more of a procedure.
I have one question. The other agencies involved, where's their water coming from?
So the other agencies, Palmdale Water District and Low Rock Creek Irrigation District, they both have been recharging their state water project supplies within Big Rock Creek.
Okay.
And Palmdale Water District also has access to the upper Amargosa Creek.
Okay, that answers it. Thank you.
Yep.
Just a quick, it's Low Rock Creek, not Big Rock Creek.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
And Mr. President, I'll move approval of Board Order 8D1.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Parrish. We have a second.
Director Miller will second.
Director Miller, second. Okay, there's no further questions, Madam Secretary?
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. Andre, if it wasn't for you, we'd still be on the first item right there. So, thank you. Okay.
Mr. President, I'll have Matt do the next item.
Okay.
All right. So this is our typical monthly review of the upcoming Watermaster meeting. We have a meeting tomorrow morning. It starts at 9 a.m. versus 10 a.m. So if you're going to tune in at 9 a.m. Included in your board packet on page 116 is a brief staff report. Number of items on the agenda tomorrow. If you could go one slide. So on the agenda, item number 11, we've reviewed this before as Watermaster or as an AVAC board, but it's the MOU between AVAC and the Watermaster for AVAC to provide interim administrative services for the Watermaster. So I think we're all familiar with this. AVAC board approved it. Tomorrow it will be considered by the Watermaster board. There's a couple comments out of the advisory committee question about should there be a term on the agreement, because we kind of left this open-ended with a 30-day notice. Either side can cancel the agreement, but the couple of the advisory committee asked if there could be a term on it. So we'll see if that comes up tomorrow for discussion. I think we're good with it the way it's written. Another question by the advisory committee is they wanted a published rate of the individuals that will be working on this task for AVAC, hourly rates and the total cost. And they wanted some commitment that we are following the scope of work that was attached to the MOU, which obviously we approved the MOU, so we're committed to that scope of work. And that's it on that item. Next slide. And feel free to jump in if you have questions.
Yeah, so tomorrow starts at 9 instead of 10.
Right.
Okay.
A question, I mean, in terms of adding a term, the previous manager had a term, but since it's the consensus board and it just goes on unless you get 5, I'm not sure if would that be necessary? Since
I don't think
really, either way, it just requires
30-day
all
notice.
5 people members to agree.
Exactly. And we didn't want to tie it to a time frame, not knowing how long the selection process or recruitment process for a new administrator is going to take, whether it's going to take 6 months or 12 months or longer. So, anything to add to that, Director Paris?
No, that's it. The term, we had talked about putting the term in, but we're putting out a request for proposal as quickly as we can for new administrators. Like Matt says, we have no idea how long it's going to take to get one. And so it did not make any sense to put in a specific term, just the 30 days that we can provide notice. And so that's the reason no term was in there.
We just talked about this item. It's the replacement water plan to be officially approved tomorrow by the Watermaster. So hopefully Director Parrish supports that. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. Next slide, Holly. There are 3 new production applications. They're all 3 for small pumper domestic use. You can see 2 single family homes and one church with minimal landscaping. The Watermaster or the advisory committee recommended approval of all 3. Correct? Yeah. So all 3 are recommended to be approved. Next slide. Do you recall earlier in 2023, AVAC entered into an agreement with Homer, who has property and water rights both here in the Yellow Valley as well as in the San Joaquin Valley. And we did a one-time transfer of Table A water in exchange for some carryover water here locally, as well as a financial gain for the agency. So that water has been delivered. The State Water Project water has been delivered within the San Joaquin Valley. So this is to finalize the other end of that deal, which is a transfer of their carryover water to AVAC. And it's 1,000 acre feet. Like I said, it's a one-time transfer of carryover water rights. This item was reviewed by the advisory committee. They had some questions as to where the production was going to occur of this water, and staff satisfied their questions, and they also recommended approval of this item. So tomorrow, I think we're asking Director Parrish to support approval.
Do we need an order on this?
No, I don't think so, because everybody. I mean, it's an agreement that we already agreed to a few months ago, so I don't think that's necessary. Next slide. There is one replacement well application. It's an existing small pumper that had a shared well. It's 2 separate parcels. They were sharing one common well, and now the second party wants to drill their own well. So it's based on the rules. It's within 300 feet from the existing well, so it's approached as a replacement well application. The advisory committee as well recommended approval of this application. So I support Director Parrish's approval of this as well. Pretty straightforward. And that's all we have on that item.
And again, there's no board order. I guess here's something from the board.
Yep. I think we have a consensus and direction. Is there any other questions that anybody has on items being considered tomorrow at the Watermaster meeting?
Yeah, I had one question. Did Hallmark finish all their work till the end of the year? Or did they stick AVAC with a bunch of them? Or don't you want to answer that?
I probably wouldn't put it that way, but.
Okay.
With that now, I think it's true.
And,
well, maybe I'll turn it over to Peter. He's the new admin.
But that starts tomorrow, man.
Oh,
no, the transition has gone very well. Patty, Angel, Pam, and Teresa have done a great job of making things happen quickly and efficiently. So I feel like it's off to a good start. I don't feel like there's been an inordinate amount of leftover work that Hallmark left on the table. So I feel like we're in a good place. going in tomorrow.
My recommendation is next time we hold some money back instead of paying them in full.
Probably won't be a next time, Gary.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to see is work down off that $9.50 assessment. Hopefully we can get that number down.
We, $19.50.
If you get rid of, Gary, if you get rid of the 5-0 vote, we probably could get it down about $1.
Okay. I think it's time to move on.
Yeah, and if I could just add, going forward, while AVAC staff is serving as the administrator, I kind of want to keep them isolated from the discussion of AVAC direction on the board. So, and Peter, they're serving as admin, and the purpose of tonight's discussion is to look at from AVAC's point of view and what's the best interest for AVAC.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you. Next item, Matt, I'll turn it over to you, the general manager report.
Yeah, so we're going to start it off. Every month we have a state water project committee, which is made up of directors Van Dam, Lane, and Miller. And one thing that they've requested, which is a great idea, to review the monthly state water contractor meetings that take place up in Sacramento. So Peter Thompson attends those meetings on behalf of AVAC and the Class 8 region. So we're going to take this time to kind of give a recap of what took place at the monthly meeting last week. So I'll turn it over to Peter.
Thank you, Matt. Evening, President Lane, directors. So the agenda. You boosting my voice, Holly? All right, thank you. So we had our typical reports that come from DWR. I think of note, kind of ties a little bit into the conversation today on DCP, where they're talking about how in the South Delta we're restricted on some of the pumping that we can do. Currently, we're under 2 restrictions. One is a long fin smelt restriction. Another one is a water quality restriction. It's a turbidity restriction. So when there's too much turbidity in the area at the beginning of the water season, they have to let more go out of the South Delta. So we're under 2 pump restrictions right now. So they walked through those. They also discussed how we currently have elevated bromide. So you may have heard that term before. Bromide is one of the constituents in disinfection byproducts. And that's typical for this time of year, but it's one of those things that we're going to be keeping an eye on moving forward. Also skipped over, we had a good presentation from Alameda Water District. They're up near the San Francisco Bay. They use State Water Project in a much different way than we do. I believe it was close to 80 years ago. They were put in charge of the aquifer in their area because it had been severely overdrafted and salt water had intruded on a pretty complex, multi-layered aquifer. So they are in charge of cleaning that aquifer up, removing the brine, and they utilize the State Water Project to put water in during dry periods to help push that brine back out towards the ocean. They can't use it as much during the wet periods because they have enough runoff in their own area, so they don't really have a use for it. It's a little different, but interesting to hear how they utilize the State Water Project up there in that area. We had a board action item that revolved around budget.
What these people were contacting me about the big deal.
Thank you, Holly. And typically, state water contractors bills for 90% of their budget, and then they only bill for the remaining 10% if they need it, and they didn't need it. They're under budget this year, so they asked for permission not to go out and collect that final 10%. So that was approved.
What was the 90%? What was our share?
I think our share is close to $400,000. So our 90% would be the 360. Also, of interest to the board, the state water contractors are heavily involved this next month in interfacing with our permitting agencies. So both on the state and federal level, they're working on new permits for the South Delta pumps. And that'll have a big impact on how we can move water in the South Delta in the coming years. They're also engaged with those same agencies and other water rights stakeholders over the voluntary agreements. One of the things that came out of that meeting is that maybe they encourage that staff and board from other state water contractors attend, or virtually, the State Water Resource Control Board's workshops on the voluntary agreements. And those will be coming up in March, and I'll be happy to pass those dates along to Holly, should you want to attend and listen to the voluntary agreements workshop. Also was made aware that while not a state water project direct impact, there is going to be an AWWA sponsored workshop on the Colorado River solution, and that'll be coming at the end of February. It doesn't directly impact us, but shortages of water in that system do have put pressures on the state water project that to provide extra water, particularly in dry periods. So that may be informative, and I'll also pass that along to Holly should you be interested. Other things of importance, state water contractors are working really close with DWR on helping them improve their financial reporting to help provide a little more transparency to agencies like AVEC so we can understand where our costs are going to better and make sure that they're being monitored appropriately. And then also to resolve some long-standing dispute items that have come up through previous audits. So state water contractors very involved in finance. We'll probably be hearing about some of those finance issues over the upcoming year. And then we also kicked off the dry year transfer plan or program. So that will be, we're going to be meeting on that on Friday to discuss that program. And we'll possibly be bringing back a decision to the board to consider participating in that program should the allocation stay low this year. And that's the highlights, but also I know we had some directors in virtual attendance. If you have any thoughts or questions on that, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, I have a question. So the meeting you attend is the state water contractors, which basically is what, 27 contractors?
Correct.
Okay, so I just want to mention this, what should be on the agenda every single meeting is what we just heard earlier tonight. To me, that seems like that's going to be a priority. So maybe you want to bring that up, Powers, to really get involved in this situation, because there's 27 of us, and 24, 25 are so small. Who in the hell is going to absorb all this stuff? You know, so, I mean, if we get it, if we nip it now in the tail right now, there's hope. But my comment is the whole state should be doing this together because it affects the entire state of California. And if we cannot be light on this, since we're a member, one of the founding members, basically, of this organization, I just want to bring that up, that needs to be really seriously looked at in those meetings.
Good, a good comment. We knew very little what was happening until just, recently. That $360,000, just looking at it immediately, that's just shy of $1,000 a day. More than that if you would include holidays and weekends, but that's nothing, that's substantial.
Understood.
And then several dollars an acre foot or water, per acre foot of our sales.
I did listen in on the meeting. It's very interesting what they bring up. And one of the things you didn't mention, which Matt usually does, is the water forecast for the year that didn't Jennifer present that? The water?
Molly White from DWR. Yeah.
Yeah, so that portion was interesting. Are you reporting on that?
Yeah, we have one slide following this discussion where we'll hit on water supply and some of the storms that are projected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I would agree with Director Donato that since the state water contractors are going to be involved, those who are involved in the conveyance project, the Delta conveyance project, that we need to be on top of that. And I agree, it should be an agenda item, I would think, for them going through this process.
You know, it's interesting you say that. Something that's dawned on me. Our state legislators, need to be involved in this. The Board of Supervisor, which is district, the D40 in our area. I mean, it's going to affect every one of these people. So I don't hear enough of it unless I'm here at this meeting or we have these people in front of us. But here we are, our own organization. There's nothing, they're not even discussing it. And so we need to somebody needs to put some meat behind it and get this thing going.
Yeah.
Man, those dues is pretty close to $6 or $7 an acre foot, man, our water rate. At least,
Yeah, we can give a presentation to show a breakdown of their budget, the state water contractors as a whole, what the budget includes and what that fee that AVAC pays.
But we know it adds $6 or $7.
Yeah.
You want you to double it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my dad used to say, if you don't think it's a lot, just go try to borrow it.
That's it. Yeah.
Anything else? Did you have something to say, Director Van Dam? Looked like you were going to say something. No, you're good.
Oh, and speaking about that, what about the $9.50 an acre foot for Watermaster that goes up? I'm going to be closer to $19.50.
So we'll plan on briefing the board every month with what activities are going on within the state water project.
Very good.
Yeah.
And continue your report, Matt.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Peter. So next slide, we have just a couple more slides. So, there's been some recent storm events up north or throughout the state. You can see the dark blue line there. Last week or so, there's been a pretty good uptick. We're now right at 80% of average. So based on this index, it went up to just under 20 inches. So we had a operations call yesterday afternoon, and they had the DWR climatologist guy, weather forecaster guy, and he's really good. He's definitely better than your Channel 4 evening news weather guy. But they are projecting some atmospheric rivers in the coming days and weeks. So fingers crossed that we'll see this increase. And we probably won't see an immediate jump in allocation, but if the storms continue, definitely later in February or early March, we'll get a bump in allocation. So fingers crossed. And then our last slide, just review some upcoming meetings and events. We've gone over some of these. We have Watermaster meeting at 9 a.m. The AV Edge Customer Service Academy breakfast on the 31st at 7:30 a.m.
Just a clarification, that's actually not AV Edge. We help market it, but it's put on by Antelope Valley College.
Oh, our bad. Sorry. Thank you for clarifying. The Court Water Treatment Plant is going to be offline between the 5th of February and 16th. We have planned. A lot of times we come back online early, but John has done a good job notifying all the affected customer of ours to accommodate that shutdown. And as you know, this is our annual maintenance where we go in and clean different areas and perform annual maintenance. John's offered it up before, but if there's interest in seeing some parts of the plant that you typically can't when it's flowing water, let us know. We'll schedule a tour of those areas for you.
Just keep us informed, man.
Okay, we will.
It would be interesting.
We have an association meeting coming up on February 8th, 6 p.m. here at AVAC. President's Day is going to be observed. That's Monday, the 19th of February. Just a reminder, the CSDA North LA County chapter meeting is going to be in Santa Clarita. that's the one that we hosted last time here at AVAC. So let Holly know if you plan to attend that event because they need to make accommodations. We mentioned we're going to give a water quality and regulations update. We're going to do that at the next board meeting. Jordan Ray, our lab director, is going to prepare that presentation, so should be good. And then Teresa mentioned PFM is going to give a presentation at the next meeting as well. He's going to be on Zoom. He won't be in person, but it'll be the same type of presentation. So that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Well, thank you. Is there any questions or comments from that? Okay.
I just want to say that Catherine Barger's going to be at that CSDA meeting as a speaker. So I'm going if anybody else wants to go.
Yeah, and well, one of the things with that, I mentioned that she's formed this new water working group, and that was one of the suggested. She asked what we wanted to hear about, and I suggested that as one of the topics. So could be interesting.
Okay, thank you much. Matt.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 10, director's reports. If there's any director has anything to report, now's the time to do so.
Just as being on the board or the executive committee for the Special Districts Association for North LA County, with Palmdale Water District Director Gloria Disbank stepping down, we have a vacancy. She was also our secretary. I was an at-large member and was moved into the secretary position. But also at that meeting, we're going to have an election for a new board member for that committee. The bylaws and the intent we're going with is that it would be that we only have one member of that from each per agency. So an AVAC, since I'm on there, wouldn't be open to AVAC. Right now it's AVAC, Palmdale Water District, Santa Clarita Water Agency, and the AV Mosquito Control Board. So any other agency that's a special district up here would be eligible to run someone.
Well, congratulations, Secretary. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, and that election it's one vote per agency. But with this one, we are just doing the election there, so we won't know in advance. So I don't know how we do that. Last time, I think we just chatted amongst ourselves, the directors that were there, but we'll have that coming up.
Thank you much, Jim.
Thanks.
Nothing further in the director's reports. We'll move on. Is there more attorney? Do we have any comments at this time?
Jim Markman, do you have any comments? Doesn't look like Tilden does.
Okay. Any requests for future agenda items? Okay, we do have reason to go into closed session, is that correct?
We do for 13B.
Okay. So a motion would be in order to go into closed session.
Mr. President, I'll move that we go into closed session.
Is there another motion? One second from Director Donato. Okay. Madam Secretary, if we could have a roll call.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. Take a 5-minute break.
5-minute break.
That'll bring us to item 9, public hearing to approve proposed 2024 application fee schedule. And so that's public hearing, so we have to adjourn, go into public hearing, or just do it?
Motion to open public hearing?
Motion made to open the public hearing. Is there a second? Second by Russ. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to open the public hearing, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion's carried. And now we're in the public hearing to approve the proposed 2024 application fee schedule. And is that going to be Peter? Thank you, Peter.
Chair Bears. So in front of you, you'll have a clean copy without the scanned in artifacts for the fee schedule. Staff went back. Patty and Angel did a good, thorough review and felt confident that the current fee schedule or the past fee schedule will meet our needs, AVEX staff's needs, in terms of compensating us for the time that's being put into each of those different items. So they saw no need to change the fee schedule this year. We also consulted with Todd Groundwater. They felt the same. They felt like the fee schedule was adequate. So our proposal is to move forward with no changes to the fee schedule other than clarifying verbiage for the titles of water transfer requests. And you'll see that on your copy. So we're just asking for just a cleanup to make it more clear on the fee schedule, the transfer requests, the titles of those. So if you have any questions, we're happy to answer, and I'm sure Arden or would be happy to chime in also.
Okay. Any public comments on the presentation, on the fee schedule? Any board comments on the fee schedule?
Move to approve closing the public hearing.
Motion made to close the public hearing. Is there a second? Second by Angelica. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to close the public hearing, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Public hearing is closed. Brings us to item 10, consideration possible action to approve the 2024 application fee schedule. Is there a motion to approve resolution R 2401, the 2024 application fee schedule?
Move to approve.
Motion made by Kathy. Second by Russ. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve the 2024 application fee schedule, resolution R 2401, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We're on item 11, consideration possible action on memorandum of understanding for interim administrative services between LA East Current Water Agency and LA Watermaster, and that's going to be a report by Peters.
Yes, thank you, Chair Paris. So I just want to confirm that AVEC has approved the MOU as written, and staff has engaged to make that transfer with Hallmark, and we stand ready and willing to enter into the MOU and continue the administrative services until we find a third party.
And we need to take action by approving the memorandum?
We do, yes.
Okay.
Right here? Yes, okay.
And they're willing to give us anything in the future that we may need that we're missing.
Okay.
We're not aware of.
I know I was here one day, Joshua came down with everything and did a meeting with you and did a transfer of everything. And so, just so the board knows, everything seemed to have gone very well with that, and we didn't have any issues. So.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between AVEC and AB Watermaster? So moved. Motion made by Brandon. Second by Russ. Good job, Russ. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between AVEC and AB Watermaster, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion's carried unanimously.
Chair Paris,
Peter,
if you'll indulge me before you move on, and just like there's going to be some new faces involved with the Water Master Administration. So just introduce the staff real quick.
Thank you.
So you are all familiar, or should be familiar with Patty Rose, Angel Fitzpatrick. Angel's going to be serving as my assistant administrator. So if I'm absent, she'll be in my place. She's also going to be attending the advisory committee on a regular basis. Also, we have Pam Clark, who is helping now with production reports and invoicing, and Teresa Yates. There's Teresa. She's our financial oversight, so she'll be working on the audits, making sure that our financial reports are in order. So just want to introduce that staff and let you know who's going to be doing what over the coming year.
Thank you, Peter. An outstanding team.
Welcome.
And Angel, I spoke to several people on the advisory call, and they were very appreciative of your cooperation and help with the advisory meeting.
Well, thank you.
And Dennis, did we get an agenda out on time? Great. And is there a change order for the extra cost of that? I just already.
You guys even included the page numbers.
Okay, that does bring us to item 12, consideration and possible action authorizing signers for transacting business with Citizens Business Bank. And is there a discussion about that? Who are going to be?
That would be myself and Angel.
Okay.
Stan Powell has a question.
Who does?
Stan Powell.
Hi, Stan. You have a question?
A comment. Thank you for calling on me.
Thank you.
Took a look more closely at the resolution this morning, and there are 3 whereas clauses and 3 resolved clauses. The first resolved clause doesn't really read correctly to me. I think there might be a punctuation issue or a word missing, but maybe Craig could take a look at that before you actually vote to approve it. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Stan. Can you point that out?
Craig,
you have that resolution in front of you?
let me find it.
I just took the one that we used the last time. Craig.
No.
So Stan, specifically, which whereas or which resolve one are you talking about?
It's the first resolve clause that says that Peter Thompson and Angel Fitzpatrick, acting together, are authorized to, in the Watermaster name and on its behalf, and acting together to sign checks of the Watermaster and orders withdrawing funds from Citizens Bank. And I've just had trouble reading that and be sure I understand it. And particularly the words are authorized to in the Watermaster's name.
Should be act.
Either act or punctuation. Something is just unclear there. So that's all my comment was. So you see what it is now to deal with it, Craig. So
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Stan.
I would suggest we amend to add the word act after to resolve that Peter Thompson and Angel Fitzpatrick acting together are authorized to act in the Watermaster's name and on its behalf.
To act in the Watermaster's name and on its behalf. And then it's fine.
The rest of it is fine.
And acting together to sign checks.
Right.
So you are authorized to insert the word act in the Watermaster's name.
Correct.
And that's the amendment to this. So we can just approve this
As amended.
Subject to the amendment.
as edited or as,
Yes.
we don't need to make a motion to amend it. We just need to be aware when we approve it that it's been edited to include that language.
Exactly.
And then the resolution that I will sign, I'll make sure that that is inserted. Okay. So item 12, resolution R2402, authorizing specified individuals to transact business with Citizens Business Bank. Is there a motion to approve resolution R2402 with the edit in the first resolved as we discussed.
So moved.
Motion made by Kathy, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Angelica, is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve Resolution R2402 with the insertion of act in the first resolve, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carried unanimously. And then Patty, before I sign up, you'll make sure that's in. Great. I'll keep this out. That brings us to item 13, consideration possible action to accept and file the replacement water plan submitted by the Antelope Valley State Water Contractors Association, which satisfies the Watermaster's replacement water responsibility for replacement water assessments collected as of October 30th, 2023. Peter?
Thank you, Chair Paris. So the Watermaster Board authorized a letter to the AV State Water Contractors requesting them to provide replacement water for all the paid replacement water obligations during last year. And the AV State Water Contractors reached out to each of the agencies, AVEC, Little Rock, Palmdale. The general managers came together, put together a plan for returning over stored groundwater for the replacement water. And that plan is in front of you today. And that plan has also been reviewed by Todd Groundwater. And we're looking for your final authorization. Upon your final authorization, Watermaster will turn over funds to AV State Water Contractor, and then Todd Groundwater will make the proper deductions from each agency's stored water. And happy to answer any questions you might have on that or the process.
And I'd like to add that I included a slide at the end of the Watermaster engineer update that just kind of shows where we factor in that water into our calculations in the annual report.
Is that you, Arden?
Oh, sorry. Yes, this is Arden.
Okay. Thanks, Arden. Okay, everybody sees that? Any questions on any of that?
Move to approve.
Motion made to accept and file the replacement water plan. Is there any further discussion? No, one motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Kathy. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion to accept and file the replacement water plan, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion's carried unanimously. Brings us to item 14, update on 10-year carryover requirements in developing storage agreements. And who's going to be doing that update?
I'll be doing that. This is Arden.
Oh, great. Hi, Arden. Go ahead.
Hello. All right.
You are on camera.
Oh, it's saying that I cannot share my screen while the other participant is sharing.
And Arden, can you speak up a little bit?
Yes. Yes, I will. It's saying right now that I cannot share my screen while the Watermaster is sharing their screen.
Okay, hang on 1 minute. We're trying to fix that for you.
Thank you.
There we go.
Go ahead and try now.
All right.
There you go.
Okay. Now. All right. Can y'all see the slides well?
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. So I'm going to be providing an update on the process that we're kind of fleshing out and the conversations that we're having regarding carryover nearing that 10-year carryover limit before a storage agreement is needed. So first, I just want to give a little summary of carryover water. So the carryover water is the water that either an Exhibit 3, Exhibit 4 party, or State of California parties, according to the judgment, can accrue when their production right, or IWRF, if applicable, is not used. And according to the judgment, carryover water is produced on a first in, first out basis. So that means that the water that is acquired at the earliest time is then the first water that's used, so that the quote youngest or earliest water is used before the older water is. And the way that we account for carryover water in the groundwater accounting is in the Appendix B tables. A party will use first their production right for the year. In the past, when we had ramped down, they would use any ramped down water, and then IWRF would be used. And once all of their rights for that year are used, then the carryover water, if applicable, is used. And then you get into overproduction and the need for replacement obligations. But any remaining water that isn't used from either that year's production right or that year's IWRF then goes into carryover water. And I'll note that ramp down was not, ramp down could not go towards carryover water. If ramp down was not used, then that water was simply not used. So in the judgment, this is a lot of text, but I'll just highlight, it does say if carryover water is not converted to a storage agreement, carryover water not produced by the end of the 10th year reverts to the benefit of the basin, and the producer no longer has a right to the carryover water. And this is, I believe in the judgment, because if we look at how carryover water is accrued each year, this is one of the charts that we showed in the December meeting showing the total carryover water for Exhibit 3 and 4 parties by sub-areas. We can see the total amount of carryover water by parties in the basin increases each year, and it will continue to increase. And so at the 10-year mark, it's expected we'll really need to start thinking critically about how that water is used so that it's not all used at once and we aren't doing harm to the basin by having all of this water that has been accrued and is used without oversight. And so really the expectation of the storage agreement, and I'll get into kind of that and some of the discussions that we had with council and admin, is so that there is a little bit of oversight to make sure that the water use is not causing material injury in the basin. And I'll note that I've edited these slides a little bit since our conversation with council and admin. I had submitted these slides for the packet prior to that conversation. And also want to invite Councilor Admin to add any insight that they think might be appropriate in this conversation and presentation.
Arden, I have a quick question just for the public. When will the 10-year period, or I guess that's your next slide. Go ahead.
Yes. So the first carryover water was accrued from 2016 production that was unused. And so we confirmed in our conversation with council that in 2026, the first carryover water will be 10 years old. So right now, the oldest carryover water is 7 years old. And we see that this 10-year mark is coming up and want to be proactive in planning for it because the implications still need to be fleshed out a little bit. And that's what we're hoping to work towards. So I'm going to walk through kind of our process that we're developing for calculating the age and tracking the age of carryover water that parties have. And there's a few assumptions that are going into this that are guided by the judgment and our conversation with council. The first one is that right now, the oldest water is 7 years old. The 2016 water could first be used in 2017. And we're assuming that the oldest carryover water is used first, and that's based off of that first in, first out description in the judgment. And also, I have confirmed, since these slides were submitted for the packet, that transfer water maintains the same age. And at the end, I'll get into some of the implications for the transfer water based off of our discussion and some direction that we're hoping to get from the board regarding the age of carryover water in transfers. So I'm bringing this back to the tables in Appendix B of the annual reports to walk through how we're calculating that water. So the total carryover water accrued each year is the sum of the production right that goes toward carryover water and the IWRF, or the irrigated water return flow, that goes towards carryover water each year. And then we're looking at how much carryover water is used. There's a column in those reports that say carryover water used. This gets a little bit more complicated. I'll also add when there are transfers, because often the transfers are coming from carryover water for one-time transfers. And then in the process that we're thinking, then the age of the transfer water stays the same. And so that the oldest water, either transfer or carryover water accrued by the same party, is the water that would be used first. So in this example, we have a party named Todd's Groundwater, and they accrued carryover water in most years from 2016 through 2022. And so this table is kind of showing each year the volume that they're accruing. And then towards the right, we have the sum of all of the carryover water and transfer water that was used by the party. And so this information is coming from the Appendix B tables that I showed before. And then on the very right, we have the total carryover water that the party accrued minus the total volume used. And so that's their current carryover volume. So if they've used 120 acre feet over the past 7 years, then implementing the first in, first out rule, we're saying that the oldest carryover water is used first. So in this case, they've used all their 2016 water. They've used all their 2017 water. They didn't accrue water in 2018 and 2019. So then we say they've used 30 of their 35 acre feet of 2020 water. And then when we look at their remaining water, we say, okay, they have 5 acre feet of 2020 water and 50 acre feet of 2021 water and 50 acre feet of 2022 water. So their oldest remaining carryover water is 3 years old. Is there any questions about this part of the calculation? All right, then moving on. I haven't factored in the age of the transfers for all of the one-time transfers yet, but looking at the data for the Exhibit 4 parties, I have a few sort of larger trends that I want to point out. There actually aren't that many parties that are using large volumes of their own carryover water. So in general, what we see are parties have been using their production right and some of their ramp down, and then either not accruing carryover water, or they're using slightly less of their production and accruing a little bit of carryover water, and then either keeping it or transferring that water. I do expect that in the coming years, now that we've completed the ramp down stage, that more parties will be digging into their own carryover water because they won't be receiving the ramp down water. We also see that 27 of the Exhibit 4 parties have transferred their carryover to another party. And then 55 parties in 2016 received carryover water. So that means that 55 of the Exhibit 4 parties used less than their production right and IWRF water in 2016. And then 45 of these parties, we believe, still have that 2016 carryover water remaining. And this excludes parties that may have received carryover water via transfer that was aged at 2016. So a few notes that came up in our conversation with council regarding transfers and carryover water. So in one-time transfers, I'll reiterate that we are assuming that the transferred water is maintaining the same age. Some of the one-time transfers do specifically say either this is carryover water from this year or this is same year production right. So we have an age on those. But since we haven't really factored this issue into the transfers before, many of the transfers do not specify a year right now. So we believe that it's appropriate to have the default assumption for past transfers that the earliest year carryover water is being transferred first. Water that was accrued from 2016 through 2020, and I have a 2021 transfer, then we would like to assume that the 2016 water is transferred first. And council recommended that we can allow parties to notify the Watermaster in writing if they have agreed to allocate transferred carryover water of a different year. If a party says, oh wait, we want the water from that transfer to be actually 2019 water, they can notify the Watermaster. And then we'd like to amend the one-time transfer applications so that the year and the age of the carryover water is specified, just so there's clarity in these transfers. And this may involve amendments to the rules and regulations. And another item that we would like the board's input on is the development of the storage agreement template. So council has recommended the development of a template storage agreement for carryover water transfers. And there's a few considerations that we are going to need to really think about in the development of the process for carryover storage agreements. We need to take into consideration the limitations that might need to occur for extraction of water that is related to the storage agreement. There is a concern about material injury if large volumes are of much older water are suddenly pumped. Right now we do have limitations for parties needing to produce water from their listed points of extraction and use the water for similar uses. And we may just need checks for the use of stored water to make sure that it's not causing issues and material injury to the basin. And then the process may also involve amendments to the rules and regulations. With that, I'd like to invite council to add any input and open things up for questions for anyone.
A couple of things to mention. I think this is a lot of information, and you're not being asked to act necessarily on anything today. I think working with the engineer, we ought to do a very basic, fundamental 2-page memo on what the issue is, trying to get in front of this bus before it creates a problem, and what we recommend to the board for consideration so the advisory committee can weigh in on this.
So you'll do that before we need to make a future agenda item?
Yes, that would be a recommendation.
Sounds good with me.
I'm anxious to hear public comment for sure. but listening to what Arden had said, I mean, it seems to be pretty clear in the judgment that you have to use the oldest water first. You know, there's no scenario where that's just not the case. I am very sympathetic to the fact that it's not clearly stated on our past transfer agreements how this is handled correctly, but everybody that has done transfers has stipulated to the judgment, and the judgment does speak to that inside of the document as well as the rules and regs. So it will definitely be interesting to hear public comment on this.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Peter.
I'd just like to add the administrative perspective from the conversations about this 10-year storage agreements. I think it's a really good opportunity to get out in front of a process that could become really burdensome and time consuming. So if there's a way that staff, board can, and council can find a way to, in the most simple possible way, meet the intent of the judgment that doesn't create an inordinate burden on admin and an inordinate burden on the users of the groundwater as well. I just think it's a great opportunity. We have a little bit of time and space to do that, and I just recommend leaning into that process.
And Peter, I appreciate that very much. I mean, when you get into legal theories versus operational realities, it is a half a heartbeat to wind out, you know, spending dollars running over dimes on some of this stuff. So we do need to find the most efficient way possible to manage the requirements of the judgment for this issue.
And you're right, Director Calandry, that we need to check the judgment carefully to see if we have the ability to allow parties to contract differently than using the oldest in first. We will address that. But we wanted the option to be there for discussion. We assume people want to bargain with each other on issues related to the timing and the carryover.
I do have a question. Go ahead. Where you say a transfer of stored carryover water pursuant to a storage agreement will remain stored water, does that mean that at that point the year of the carryover water does not matter anymore?
I think that's the understanding. Yes, because it would be stored water at that point, not subject to a 10-year carryover. It's subject to an agreement.
I can understand where Director Martin's at on that. I mean, that being cognizant of the overdraft situation and how quickly we could get in trouble with that is an issue that like I said, I'm excited to hear back on. And also, one of the issues that was brought up to me that I'm still wading through is carryovers derived from a permanent right. So if you get into a situation as well where you have somebody with a permanent right that's selling their annual allocation that doesn't necessarily classify it as carryover, how do you handle that? I mean, I don't think it's very clear to me quite yet, and I know we'll find the clarity on it. If you have 100 acre feet a year and you're selling that allocation, you're selling your annual allocation, not necessarily classifying that as carryover, but the person that is purchasing that, you have to figure out how to handle that water to the transferee. Because, you know, you might get in a situation where that bus, to use your analogy, runs you over as far as the overdraft situation in the basin.
Good point. It's a tricky issue because the judgment does talk about carryover retaining its character after a transfer. So we've got to harmonize that with whatever we come up with here.
Yes, we do, because we don't want to get in a litigious situation on how we're handling some of this stuff with the transferors or the transferees on this.
We'll make sure the memo addresses those and leaves them open for discussion. Fortunately, we do have some time here to get this right.
No, absolutely.
And and I am sure this is going to come up in the future, but once we get a system to bank the water, is there going to be is that water bank forever until it's used, or is there going to be some type of limitation on that?
I think that's to be discussed. This is the first issue of first impression here. What is the character of the water? What are the restrictions under which the stored water is held and can be used? Is there a timeout provision that needs to be implied? There's a number of issues.
Well, and I guess part of the issue that I bring up on that, Director Paris Chair Paris, is, the storage agreement versus the banking agreement on imported water versus water that's left behind in the basin.
Yeah.
So we definitely got to clean up the process a little bit and add some clarity to it for those involved.
Good first discussion.
Are we
More
gonna?
complex issues.
Yeah. Are we going to be able to do public comment on this as well?
I'm sure we will several times before 2026.
Yes, sir.
But is there any questions of the public right now on this first presentation?
Yes, this is Jeff Siebert.
Go ahead, Jack. Yeah. Jeff.
Question for Brandon. Brandon, was your reference into selling the current year allocation water?
Yes.
Okay, so, and my next question is for Arden. If 2016 water becomes carryover in 2017, shouldn't these dates all start in 2017, not 2016?
I believe we kind of walked through it with council and admin and did determine that 2026 was the year.
2016 was the first year.
Mm-hmm.
First, that carryover, or first year that what did the first year mean?
The first year that carryover is accredited to it.
But what Mr. Siebert's asking on that, the way I interpreted his question, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, let's use a current year. It's 2024 right now. But Jeff's question was, that water, your 2024 allocation, he's saying becomes carryover in 2025. Mm-hmm. So is it your interpretation that the clock starts in 2024 or it starts in 2025?
The clock starts in 2025.
It starts in 2025. Yes. Jeff, did you hear that?
Yes, and you were correct with what you assumed there. Okay. So let's go back to reality. It's 2016. We were under no constraints in 2015. Is that correct?
That's correct, in my interpretation.
So 2016 is when you had your production right. That water became carryover in 2017. Is that correct?
I need to check that, Mr. Siebert. I'm not sure that's the case. The judgment had unique provisions operating with ramp down and other issues. So I think we need to, I don't want to make public statements about the nature of when the carryover commences without looking at the judgment carefully. So we'll address your point next month.
Mr. Siebert, did you hear that?
Yeah, yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Kyle.
Judgment and the rules and regs was fairly clear about transfer water retaining the same age. It really didn't in the judgment. It was vague. But once you did the rules and regs, we cleaned that up. I don't see anywhere where you'd have a choice of naming a year. I want to transfer 2019 water, not if I have 2016. It's very clear in the judgment and the rules and regs, first in, first out. But I just wanted to bring that in.
Thank you.
And I figured we'd have a lot more than 2 people comment on that. Okay.
You still have 2 years to go.
Yes, sir.
Plenty of time to get new questions. Okay, anything else on this very interesting issue? Thank you, Arden. Excellent report.
Thank
Good
you.
stuff.
And I really appreciate how proactive both the board and council and the advisory committee are in, helping us figure out this really complicated issue.
Okay, that brings us to item 15, consideration possible action on new production applications. And that's going to be the Arden Show also. You're on, Arden.
All right.
Item A.
Okay, excellent. And could we share, does the Watermaster have a slide? For the application? If not, then...
Do you want to see the actual application or the slide that we have up there that reviews all 3 applications?
That I don't see any slides shared right now.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
Okay, thanks.
How's that?
Perfect. Yes, this is exactly what I was hoping to see. Fantastic. So item 15A is a new production application for Irma Abalos for 1.5 acre-feet per year in the Central Antelope subarea. And this is for a domestic well that will be for a 2,500 square foot single family home with native plants and a few farm animals. And in the board packet, and I know the figures got a little bit corrupted for the board packet, but it's also in the advisory committee packet for this month pretty clearly. There are 2 figures. One is showing the general area for this application, and the other one, we decided to include those nearby production apps, or production figures that kind of show the production over a square mile to easily see if applications are, if the parcels are in areas that have a large volume of surrounding production in the area. And so this application is Willis class. And given the small amount of proposed production and the obligation to pay a replacement water assessment, Todd Groundwater finds the potential for material injury to be negligible. And this also was unanimously recommended for approval by the advisory committee.
Arden, I have a question on this one if I can.
Yes.
As discussions that I've had with you before, are very concerned about the central sub-area basin with the amount of subsidence that we've had and the different issues in there. You guys are continually monitoring that to make sure you're taking into account all transfers, where we started at, everything in your material injury analysis to make sure that we're not allowing more water to be pumped out of there than was originally there at the beginning of the adjudication.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
And just so the board understands, this party does not need to intervene because they are Willis class. And we derive that through the verification under penalty of perjury as part of the application. Correct? That's correct, Arden?
That is correct, yes. So I will add one item that we went a little bit back and forth on with this application is if you look at their most recent aerial imagery they do have improvements on the parcel. However, we base whether or not there are improvements to the parcel on what the Los Angeles County or Kern County Assessor's Office lists, and as to whether or not the parcel is improved or unimproved. And the most recent information that we have about this parcel by the LA County Assessor's Office is that it's unimproved. And there's also no existing well on the property. So we did dig into this and ultimately concluded that this is a Willis class parcel.
Okay, any other discussion? Any other questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve resolution R2403?
Motion to approve.
Motion made by Russ,
Second.
second by Kathy. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve R2403 for the Avalos property, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion's carried unanimous.
Thank you. So the next application is for Pedro Orantes, and this is requesting 1.5 acre feet per year in the central Antelope subarea. And this is for an approximately 10,000 square foot church that would have 2 bathrooms. And then the land will have about 5,000 square feet of landscaping, but the vast majority of that will be non-irrigated native landscaping with about 500 square feet of irrigated gardens. And because the water demands calculations for churches and other public spaces is slightly different than for homes, I kind of dug into a bit more the water demands of churches based off of the LA County recommendations and confirmed that 1.5 acre feet is a sufficient and appropriate volume to cover the kitchen and domestic water use needs for a community church. And Todd Groundwater finds the potential for material injury to be negligible because of the small volume. Similarly, we've included the figures showing the approximate location as well as surrounding production for this parcel. It is in the central Antelope sub-area as well. And it was unanimously recommended for approval by the advisory committee. Are there any questions?
Arden, I do have one question. I can't remember. When we're doing the new well applications, we make sure that there are they giving us any documentation to show that they're meeting the requirements of LA County Health or San Bernardino Health Department on the wells, their permits?
Excellent question. Part of something much, much deeper that I think we're going to get into at some point. Really good question.
Yeah, Arden, are we validating that they've met the requirements of these wells?
No. As far as the well requirements, we are only reviewing the plans that are provided by a driller, but there's no specific health information that's provided in these applications.
Well, they have to obtain a permit from one of the county agencies. I just wonder if we shouldn't have a discussion at some point on whether or not that ought to be included in the packet. Yes, ma'am.
Brandon, as far as I know, the applicant needs the Watermaster's approval to drill a well before they can move forward with any permits. So this step comes before the permits.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, any further discussion?
I'll only add that the issue of small systems of private wells seems to be gaining not so much traction as importance amongst at least in the public water sector. I think that we probably have a part to play in it, and this may be something that we want to be proactive about as well. But I think that's a brainstorming discussion, maybe offline, and we can come back and talk about it. But this will hit us this year, I think.
Okay, any further discussion?
I would like to add that this application does include information about their application for a well and exploration hole permit provided or that they submitted to the Environmental Health Division drinking water program. But this is not something that was included in our review of the application. But they did submit this.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, is there a motion to approve resolution R2404?
So moved.
Motion made by Kathy. Is there a second?
Second.
And Halleck a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve resolution R2404, the Orontes application, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion's carried unanimously. That brings us to item C, resolution R2405.
So this is the third of the 3 new production applications for this month. This is for Martin Torres and Blanca Vasquez, and they are requesting 1 acre-foot per year to drill a domestic well in the central Antelope sub-area. This is also towards the western edge of the sub-area, about 1 or 2 miles away from any current producer or large producers. And the domestic well will be used for a 1,600 square foot home with about 400 square feet of irrigated landscaping. And Todd Groundwater finds the potential for material injury to be negligible given the small volume requested, and the advisory committee unanimously recommended this application for approval.
Arden, I have a question for you on that. It's not the first time seeing Mr. Torres come across here. How many different sites has he done, and what's the proximity to this one?
I have not looked into that. Yes, I can check real quick and see how many sites that we have approved for him.
Well, do me a favor, there's no basis for denial on this, but it is something I want to be aware of in the future and what's happening.
Yes. So.
And also, is he current on all of his reporting?
I'm not sure about that either.
Well, it isn't part of the material injury analysis. Make sure everybody's up on their reporting.
Yes, that is true. I did not realize that Mr. Torres did have a previous new production.
Then I'm going to make a motion that we table this until we get all the information back on his current standing. And I would also like an update on his other projects in the proximity to this one.
Second.
Okay, motion to table a decision on resolution R2405. Is there any further discussion?
Quick clarification. So we reviewed 2 of these prior to that one. We need to extend that to the other 2.
We've already voted and done it. I don't think we can go back.
Well, I think your reasoning on this is you're aware that Mr. Torres has made other applications.
Yes.
And that have been approved, and you're wanting to get clarification if he's up to date on payment and reporting on those other applications.
Yes.
So.
Because it was not done during our analysis.
Of the material harm.
Yes.
Okay. And so we're going to put this over for the next meeting.
And publicly stated, we've got boxes that we need to check off. One of the boxes isn't checked off. So I feel we need to table this until we get everything done in our process.
Understood. And Arden, you understand the questions that Brandon has?
Yes. And I want to say thank you for bringing this to our attention. This is something that I had overlooked.
No problem.
And it's a
So
very good
do
one.
we have like any kind of it almost sounds like we need to have some cross data information so that there is another one out there that have something else that aren't somehow shows that they have other applications or other business. So just something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I think we want to also keep in mind the rules and regs allow us to take the position that if you're asking something from the Watermaster, and we've talked about this before, you've got to be up to date on assessments, metering, production reports. Yeah. That is the leverage this board has to get compliance. Because when applicants need your vote, suddenly production reports are forthcoming. All the compliance is there. Mm-hmm. We may want to have a discussion about how we can assure ourselves that cross-check is done.
Yes.
Production reports are up to date. Metering, if applicable, is up to date. Assessments are been paid, etc.
Very good, thank you.
And I also see that Mr. Torres has one new production application that was accepted, and that was in June 2020, and he has not provided, I'm sorry, that's January 2020, and he hasn't provided any annual production reporting since.
All right. Yeah, I would think we would want to communicate that issue to him before. I mean, that's a critical issue to be up to date on. I would recommend the engineer or the administrator send that letter saying whatever is due needs to be done before an application will be considered by the board.
Can you remind me the consequence? I think we've established this for failing to report. Was there a penalty or?
There's no financial penalty on it, but you can't get anything from the Watermaster.
Right. Well, once you got it, you don't need it.
Yeah. Well.
And new production parties will be invoiced for the volume that they requested each year automatically if they fail to report or give us an update.
That's right. We can revoke essentially the approval of new production if we don't get production reports. Mm-hmm. So that is a significant tool.
Thank you.
I believe we still have to vote on the tabling. We've got a first and a second.
We're having discussion.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
I believe we had a public comment, Chair Parrish.
Oh, public comment, go ahead. So the question from the public is, what are the reporting requirements for small pumpers who are using less than 3 acre feet?
I don't believe there are any.
Well, Brent, real quick, yeah, there's difference in party because he's not a known or qualified small pumper, so he doesn't have the same rights.
Yeah, it's different.
Or if the Watermaster becomes aware of facts that more than 3 acre feet are being used, they can act. Yeah.
Okay, good discussion. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion to table R2405 to our next meeting to get more reporting done on the material harm issues and payment of past fees. All in favor of the motion table, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. That brings us to item 16, consideration possible action on transfer application R2406 WDS California 2 to AVAC, 1,000 acre feet, temporary one time.
Thank you. So this application is a one-time transfer from WDS California to AVEC, and both are Exhibit 4 parties that are located in the West Antelope subarea. if you look at figure 1 included in the application, you can see that the WDS California parcels are directly north of the West Side Water Bank, which are the parcels that were specifically listed where this water would be extracted from in the application. So WDS California has a total production right of 3,249 acre feet per year. This includes both their original right and water permanent production rights that were acquired through transfers. And from 2017 through 2023, WDS produced less than 1 acre foot per year and currently has 12,231 acre feet in carryover. And AVEC has a production right of 4,250 acre feet per year and currently has 9,470.41 acre feet of carryover water. And from 2017 through 22, for all of AVEC's production was recovery of stored water. And so this transfer does not yet have a specific use, but it will be used to supplement AVEC's bank's state water project water in future years. And also figure 2 shows hydrographs surrounding both sites. And so we can see that water levels in general are relatively stable. There is one monitoring well that shows slightly declining water levels at USGS well 44301. But this is upgradient of West Side Water Bank, and it doesn't appear to be affected by the water bank operations. So when the monitoring wells closer to the water bank show fluctuations related to recharge and recovery, this well, which is the one towards the bottom left of the figure, does not seem to be affected by changes related to water bank production at all. So this transfer is a shift in location within the same sub-area. The parcels are relatively close together. And so Todd Groundwater finds the potential for material injury to be negligible. And this application was unanimously recommended for approval by the advisory committee. Are there any questions?
Yes, there are. Arden, this is Director Landry. I'm showing on my financial list that WDS has $1,400 over 90 days that's owed to us, in addition to another $1,400 plus or minus, that's 31 to 60 days. Does anybody know if those financial needs have been met or the financial aspects of them?
Brandon, both invoices have been paid.
So they're paid in full on those. Okay.
Arden, I do have a question. This is Director Martin.
Yes.
So at this point, we do not know when the extraction is going to happen, but yet you're saying there's no material injury, even though we don't know. Is that because the extraction has to happen within those 7 APNs?
Yes.
Okay. And one more thing. I see that in the application, the water that's being transferred is 1,000 acre feet of carryover, but we don't have it here. And I know we just started the conversation in a prior item, but I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
And Arden, one more point of clarification. While we're assuming that that extraction point is going to be used on those parcels, or they're required to, they do have the ability to request a new extraction point, which would then kick in a new analysis on material harm to the basin, correct?
That is correct, yes. So if there's a new point of extraction for this production, then we will need to do a material injury analysis.
Perfect, thank you.
Matt, just for the public, could you come on up and just explain why the extraction will take place where we've said it would in the application? Might be a good education for the public about where we're taking our water from.
Yeah. Okay, Matt Knutson with AVAC. Good morning. So AVAC's plan for this water, as Arden mentioned, is to recover it from the West Side Water Bank recovery wells. That could change in the future. Right now, this supply is being added to AVAC's overall stored water supply, in addition to our stored imported water. Our first priority is always our imported water supplies that are banked within the bank. So if those get depleted in the future, then this water could be pumped by the agency. And as Director Clandry mentioned, if we do plan to pump this water at our agricultural wells that are northeast of the West Side Water Bank, or the Bench Ranch wells, which are kind of southeast of the West Side Water Bank, then we would go through the process and have that analysis done. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing no further discussion, is there a motion to approve Resolution R2406?
Motion to approve.
Second.
By Russ, second by Brandon. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve Resolution R2406, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion's carried unanimously. We're now on consideration possible action on replacement well application, and that's going to be our administrative staff.
Hi, thank you, Rob. Holly, you can go back to the presentation if you'd like. For item number 17, we have one replacement well application on this month's agenda. It starts on page 163 of your agenda packet. It's for Mary Moffitt. It is for domestic use in the southeast sub area. The applicant has a known right to produce groundwater under the judgment as a small pumper. And she is requesting this replacement well to stop sharing a well with a neighboring parcel. They have an existing shared well agreement. And this well will be constructed less than 300 feet from the existing well. And the existing well will not be destroyed because the neighbor will continue to use the existing well in the future. Does anybody have any questions?
Is that then a replacement well? Would
Yes,
it be an
that
additional well?
the additional well is a replacement well.
And I understand what you're saying. It's definitely a gray area because when you talk replacement well, it means you're deactivating one well and engaging a new one. This almost seems like it's a new well application versus a replacement well application.
I agree. So in the judgment, small pumpers are allowed to drill a new well to stop sharing with the existing well. And if the well is within 300 feet of an existing well, it doesn't trigger material injury. So the replacement well application is the best fit for this situation. And we've always used this application. If the well were over 300 feet from the existing well, that would trigger material injury, and it would be a new point of extraction for a small pumper, and they still would not be required to destroy that existing well.
Craig, what type of liability do we assume in a situation like this? Because it seems like there could be a potential issue without having some type of documentation from the neighbor that's sharing that well. I mean, I'm very familiar with a lot of wells in the Antelope Valley that were drilled, back in the days when you had a 20 or 25 foot standing water level. And depending on what that person's well is, it seems like drilling a well that close by in this situation without having the other neighbors sign off on it could create a potential issue for us with running their well dry.
That is certainly a possibility. We haven't had that actually arise, at least in terms of our last 7 years with the Watermaster board. It's certainly something we can look into. I feel like that risk is there with every well application we approve.
Yeah, but this is kind of unique.
Yeah, right.
This is a unique aspect.
That's true.
Maybe I can add a little bit of clarification. So this water has always been used. Both households are allowed to pump 3 acre feet of water from that existing well. So the fact that they're just moving their 3 acre feet over a little, they'll no longer pump it from the existing well. They'll now just pump it from their own well.
There's no additional use.
No additional use.
Okay. But just so you understand where I was coming from on it, the operational reality is if you have an old well that's been there for years and that's at 50 or 60 acre or 50 or 60 foot down, like the old domestic wells used to be, and this new guy comes in and drills one at 100 or 120, that action of the new well could cause that other one to potentially run dry. I mean, in a situation like this, I would almost feel better if both parties signed off on this. And I don't even know if we can have that happen, but do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
So something to think about, Craig.
Something we could look into, whether we essentially get a release.
Yes.
Well, it talks about a neighboring agreement between them, right? Is that was mentioned?
Yeah, so they have a shared well agreement for their existing well. And to stop sharing that well, they're now drilling their own well.
And we're waiting. I appreciate Brandon's comment that track, and I agree. I can also think of a situation like a condo where your neighbors aren't keeping their stuff up, they're not paying their share, so you bail and want to build your own well. In that case, it's in the other property owner's interest to disagree, to oppose the new well. And my only purpose of mentioning that is, I think we're well intended. Let's think through it before we come up with a new check process. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, is there a motion to approve resolution R2407?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Motion made by Brandon. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kathy. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve resolution R2407, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We're now on the administrator's report. Peter?
All right. Some slides coming up. Holly, can you advance to the next one? Thanks. So we thought it'd be good starting off fresh with recycle that administrative staff, that we go through kind of the milestones for the year and just give the board a heads up of what's coming and our approach. And we really want this to be an open conversation. If you feel like there are some things that we're missing on this, or we want to hear it, if we're on the same page, that's fantastic. So we just wanted to check off January. We did, say we, when I say we, I mean mostly Patty and Angel and Pam and Teresa, Holly, Diane did a great job of transitioning us with Hallmark. They're very efficient and very effective. They've also prepared and mailed the fixed invoices, so those are out, as well as the annual production reports. And we're already receiving back checks and production reports this time. Next slide. All right. So then in July, we'll facilitate the landowner representative elections. We're going to send out our reminders for any unpaid replacement water assessments or variable invoices. And we'll also have the annual report to approve at that time. August, we are going to be assessing those delinquent charges for the unpaid variable assessments replacement water. September, we expect to have the election results back and to seat the landowner seat on the board at that time. And we're going to present our suite of unpaid delinquent assessments to the board at that point as well. So that'll be September, October. We're looking at another sub-area management group committee meeting. And then hopefully we'll have our replacement water rate for 2025 available in October, as well as the administrative rate. And we'll be presenting on the administrative budget for the first time. No meeting in November. And then in December, we'll be approving the water rates approving the administrative rate and approving the budget. So that's our outlook for the year from an administrative staff perspective. And we love to hear your comments if you feel like that's on track, or if you have any other things you would like to add.
Yes, go ahead.
First, and I expect that I speak for the entire board. This is awesome. This is something that I would have hoped to have received as a new board member. Really, really helps organize the process. My first reflection, a thought for you. We obviously have a financial issue that we need to deal with. I think this is fantastic for tasks. I wonder if it would be appropriate, and I'm not going to say it is, but I wonder if it would be appropriate to add some checkpoints in there for assessing our finances. I know that last year the board let this get away from us, and we really pushed it to the end of the year. A thought consideration.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent recommendation. Maybe a quarterly check on where we are on our budget.
Okay.
And
revenue
and budget.
Revenue and estimate.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you. But really cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Very well done. Thank you, guys.
It was a we effort, and by that I mean Angel. So, and our plan moving forward is to give at least a 2-month look ahead at some of the items that are coming up, and that'll give an opportunity for the board to add in items that you'd like. So,
excellent.
Thank you. All right, Holly, next slide. All right, so this one's pretty simple. I know the board had asked for admin staff, or the previous admin staff, and Todd Grandwater to look into 40th Street East Water Groups. Their application fee. They have like a package deal with 2 of the CELICs. And in the past, they only paid 1 application fee, and there was a request to look at whether or not they needed to pay 2. And both admin staff and Todd Grandwater feel like 1 is appropriate, and we're going to insufficient to cover our costs. We just wanted to update the board on following through on that task.
And Peter, they contacted me, and they were very appreciative of your guys' help.
Great. All right, if there's no other questions or comments on that, we'll move on to the next one. So part of our task is going to be going out for an RFP process for a third-party administrator to find someone else to sit in these seats. But I wanted to walk the board through what we see as sort of the timeline and process for that and get your feedback, make sure that we're on the same page. So, in January, well, actually, like probably after this meeting, staff's going to start working on the RFQ to go out. And really, with the RFQ, just to remind everyone, RFQ is looking for interested parties that fit the experience that the board's looking for and have the skill sets needed to execute the administrative tasks that the Watermaster board has. So we're not looking at finance, we're not looking at their rates, we're just looking at, are they good fits? And we're going to request for interested parties to come back and submit an application. So we're hopeful that we'll have a draft RFQ to the advisory committee and the board for your feedback at the February meeting. And with that feedback, if things go smoothly, we'll have a final RFQ to the Watermaster board for consideration in March. We would send that out immediately. In April, staff would begin working on an RFP. So being really diligent to line out, make sure we're getting all the tasks that the staff needs to perform to your satisfaction within that RFP, and give an opportunity for the advisory committee to really vet that out. We're going to start that work in April, and then have that draft for you in May for both the advisory committee and the board. We anticipate getting back RFQ responses for advisory committee and board to review in May, and we also anticipate the board may want to select respondents even at that meeting. That you may be able to see a suite of applicants that you want to come back for an interview and review their qualifications. So then in June, we would see we're anticipating maybe interviews with those that you select. And then hopefully at that meeting, we're able to select some of those that respond to the RFQ to move on to the RFP process that we'll have finalized hopefully at that June meeting with a thorough understanding of those tasks. We can hand that over to the selected RFQ respondents, allow them to respond to what the cost would be anticipated for completing those tasks. Then, all right, in July, RFP responses to the advisory committee and board, and a possible decision on third-party administrator in July. That'd be about the earliest that I would envision it if we follow through on this process. Also possible that in August we extend those, we do some more interviews, more negotiation. And then I've noted on here the early start of transition. If we make a really quick selection, that could be August. Or your thoughts?
They don't want to get in a rush. Want to do it right. Take the time to do it thoroughly. Just appreciate your guys' again willingness to step in and help out with this whole process. And just don't want to get rushed. Want to do it right.
Okay. And any further discussion? Okay.
All right. That completes my report.
Great. Appreciate it. Good job. Brings us to item 20, our general counsel's report. Update on court proceedings.
We had the Watermaster engineer's report.
Oh, I'm sorry. Why did we? Arden, I always do that to you. Arden, Watermaster.
No worries. No worries.
2-minute break.
Yes, we're going to take we're actually going to take a 5-minute break, Arden.
All right.
To have everything ready for us, and we'll be back here at, that's going to be 10:37, 10:38.
I'm going to share my screen. All right. Okay, can y'all see this?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. First, I just want to really thank everyone on the admin team, Peter, Angel, Patty, Pam, and Teresa, for making this transition as seamless as possible. I also really appreciated y'all's presentation and organization with the situation that could have been really difficult. So thank you for that. And I will dive into the Watermaster engineer's report. So first, I do just want to give a little quick overview on how we factor in the RWA deductions that are listed in the letter from the Antelope Valley State Water Contractors Association. In the letter, there's a table for the Watermaster engineer to note the locations and volumes of deductions for the replenishment of RWAs. And in each annual report, we have our recharge accounting tables in Appendix C. And so at the top, we'll have the total recoverable stored water at the end of the previous year at each site. And then in the area that I've outlined in red is where we put the amount deducted for the replenishment of RWAs. And that depends on the location that is selected for the replenishment. And that is dependent upon where the RWAs occurred. So we work with the State Water Contractors Association in order to try to get these deductions as close as possible to the locations where overdraft or I'm sorry, not overdraft, but the need for the RWAs occurred. And then the total recoverable stored water is the amount of recoverable stored water minus that deduction. So this is water that then is not recovered out of the basin. So with that, I will give our summary of new production and qualified small pumpers. I want to note that this table is actually a little different than in the packet because I realized this week that there were 15.4 acre feet of temporary new production that was granted to Ron Bannock, that the cutoff for that use was the end of 2023. So I subtracted 15.4 acre feet per year from the total volume and the west sub area total approved volume. So the change from December 2023 is actually 14.4 acre feet per year lower because there was 1 acre foot per year that was approved in the last meeting. And then the 15.4 acre feet per year was subtracted from the total amount. And then last year, we didn't have any changes in qualified small pumpers. We don't really expect to see many coming forward. For the model update, unfortunately, Maureen needed to step out to attend another meeting just now. So I'll give a very brief model update. We are still working on creating the... I'm sorry.
Yeah, before you jump into here, I have a question on your prior slide.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Is there going to be at any time, is there a time limit for when people can become small pumpers?
Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Because I know we wanted to keep track of it to make sure we knew how much extra water we were allocating to that. But, and that might be
there is a number in the judgment about the unknown small pumper class.
Right.
But we aren't anywhere close to that at this point.
Yeah, that's what I thought. There's no time limit. It has to do with
numbers and stress on the basin.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I wanted to, just for the public to know that, the reason why we're keeping track of this. So, thank you, Arnie. Go ahead.
Thank you. So back to the model update. We're continuing to work on the return flow distribution throughout the basin and keeping it consistent with the judgment. So moving forward with that and coming up this year, we will be focusing on the model calibration and then making any additional adjustments that are needed in order to make the model usable and working towards applying it to material injury analyses and water budgets. And then the last items that I'm wanting to discuss are an update on our metering compliance. And within this, there's kind of two main items that I'd like to discuss. The first is a brief overview of the draft letter that we wrote that we intend to send to parties. And the draft of this is included in the packet. And then the second item is the pre-approved meter installers and testers list. It's come to our attention that several of the individuals and companies listed may no longer be providing the services. And we're hoping prior to getting the draft letters out, because we expect that there may be a push for more meter installation and documentation following that. We want to make sure that this list is updated and confirm that we do have ample personnel available in the Valley who can assist the parties with documentation and installation of meters, as well as testing and calibration if needed. So first, a review of kind of what we discussed in December related to our approach to overall compliance in the basin. The first is that we are intending to send out a letter from the Watermaster engineer to all parties regarding their status for compliance with metering, also their status in regards to annual production reporting and submitting their metering production reports. And we have also decided these are letters that should be sent out to even parties who are compliant to inform them that they are in compliance and thank them for that. And this is also an opportunity for clarification or documentation submission before any party names are publicly posted. And the next step would then be to have a compliance list that's posted in the board packet, the board meeting packet. After that, if there's not any action taken, the next escalated step will be a letter from council to inform them that there is a possibility of enforcement. And then the next step is enforcement.
Which is basically
go ahead.
an injunction against further pumping of groundwater. That's our primary remedy. I'd like to avoid that, the cost of having to do that, but that's the lead prong in motivating people to get this kind of compliance in order.
And Craig, are we going to give them some type of grace period on this?
We always do.
Okay.
I mean, as a matter of fact, these letters have, if we don't hear from you in 15 days, we plan on going forward.
Okay.
They've already had several years grace period.
I'm just asking. I wasn't advocating for it. I was asking.
And I had a question at this point. If somebody doesn't, are people providing their production reports that don't have metered wells? And if so, how can we allow that?
Well, it's if somebody purchased water rights for investment purpose with no stated extraction point, they still need to put 0 on the form,
on production,
fill it out, and send it in.
But I mean, people that actually
Compliance letter that that could be sent out to parties, where it's kind of fed by a table that we have showing the party, what type of party, what class. Are they exhibit 3, exhibit 4? Are they new production? Where they stand on meter documentation and installation. So do we have documentation for what we believe to be all of their wells? Or have they indicated that they have some wells that don't yet have documentation? So we have documented meters for all wells, documented meters for some wells, or parties that don't have any documented meters. And it'll say different things for each one. And then similarly, have we received in the past year a monthly flow meter production report from this party? Have we received some in the past, or have we never received any reports from this party? And additionally, have we received their most recent annual production, or I'm sorry, have we received all of their annual production reporting? Or do they still have outstanding annual production reports that we need from this party? Additionally, this for new production parties, this will provide a reminder of changes to the rules and regulations that they will be invoiced if they are not reporting. In these letters, we also intend to include a simplified fact sheet about reporting requirements and the links and also QR codes to the Antelope Valley Watermaster website and the web pages that provide the more detailed metering instructions and requirements. as well as contact information for the Watermaster engineer. So this is all I have for the presentation regarding the metering compliance letters before I get into the testing and installer lists. But are there any questions about this?
When is the plan to get them sent out?
We don't have an exact schedule. It depends on the development of the pre-approved meter testing and installer list, because we do want to make sure that that's in working order. Potentially, it could be, I would say, after the next meeting, we could be ready to get these sent out in that time.
And who's working on getting the installers and people that can do this that we're going to put into delivery? Is that an administration or is that?
I'm sorry, I had trouble hearing that. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, who's working on finding other installers and people that can do this for our list? I would imagine Brandon would probably know many of them.
Well, I think one person that we feel put on the list that we need to get on there is micrometer. Micrometer is the most widely used meter in the valley. That is one option we want to make sure we have on there. I've had somebody on my staff working with Arden and they're some alternative people together.
Okay, great. That was the question.
And this is the perfect segue to our plans on getting this list updated and our strategy for trying to identify any additional folks who might be available to get on this list. So we did our last update 3 years ago of going through everyone on the list and checking their status, and recognize that it's time for a new update. And we want to make sure prior to sending out letters that we especially have installers who are on the list that anyone can call in order to get their meter installed and documented. Because only the pre-approved meter installers can submit the Watermaster meter documentation. And there are parties that appear to have existing meters on their wells, but they haven't had any of the installers submit the documentation. And it's the installers who need to be the ones to, even if there's an existing meter, to check it and test, provide the documentation that's needed for a party to have a documented meter. And then on the testing end, we need the testers to every year test or every 3 years calibrate meters. And at this point, it is important to make sure that the measurements are accurate, but the number one priority is making sure that there are meters on everybody's wells. So making sure that the installer's side of this list prior to sending out the letters is really the priority. And we recognize that we haven't actually developed a protocol for removing installers or testers from the list, and want to run by our plan with the board. So we're wanting to first email every installer and tester on the list, see if we can get a reply, yes, I'm interested in staying on the list and available. See if they have recommendations for colleagues who can also join the list, because we do require the individual on the list to be the one who is the installer. And so there can be multiple individuals from the same company on the list, and that will hopefully help increase the availability of folks. And if we don't hear back from the emails, follow up with a phone call. So that's for making sure everyone's active. And then the request for reaching out to new installers and testers is largely probably going to be word of mouth. So this is kind of our request. As some of y'all has mentioned, you have folks or companies in mind who we should reach out to. And please continue to send them our way. And we can reach out and just let them know that we are really looking for qualified folks to join this list and explain to them the process. If someone is interested in being on the list, they can come to us and vice versa, or we'll reach out to them and let them know that we'd like to see if they're interested. And we require that they read and understand the rules and regulations. And then there's a brief, about 15-minute interview that just ensures that they have experience with installation or testing of meters, and that they are aware of the judgment and the rules and regulations regarding the meters. All right.
And I'd like to jump in real quick.
Yes.
So the rest of the board is aware of kind of how we got here. Most drilling companies, their rigs are all operated by diesel engines. When California passed their new diesel emissions laws, it put all of our local guys out of business. So we lost a substantial amount of our local drillers and well operators through the carbon initiative in the state of California. So we do have to find replacement companies for some of the people on that list.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Questions from the public? Arden, anything else?
That's all. I really thank all of your participation and interest in helping improve compliance. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have any ideas or questions related to this. But I'm excited to move forward and hopefully get more tested or more documented meters on wells and more reporting and compliance. And I'd also like to add, we've been getting in a lot of production reports from the past quarter, and we really appreciate that from all of the parties.
Great. Thank you very much, Arden. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Now we're on the general counsel's report.
We're going to cover the litigation matters basically in closed session. We have two appeals. They're a matter of public record. There's also a matter where we're seeking interim before the appeal is decided, around $160,000 in fees and costs. We would have to wait until the appeal is final on that to renew that request. Beryl Springs is on appeal, as noted. I'll update you on further developments on all those. I just wanted to remind the board in terms of recovering attorney's fees in litigation. Basically, unless you have a contract, a statute, or some other document, attorney's fees are generally not recoverable in California. Our judgment says the parties are, unless there's a court order otherwise, the parties involved in litigation over the judgment are to absorb their own fees and costs. But we have, our judgment has been approved by the court, obviously, rules and regulations signed by the judge, and we have enforcement, including recovery of attorney's fees. We're getting replacement water assessments, administrative assessments, compliance with the judgment, difficult questions of transfer of title. We have specific authority to recover fees in that situation. So just wanted to remind the board, we look for every opportunity to recover those, and we will in the pending appeals also. So the rest is for closed session, unless there's any questions.
Question following up on that, coming from our last subject. So if we are enforcing people to get meters, that would be covered under the judgment, and we could get attorney fees reimbursed for that?
Correct.
So that might be something we might want to put in our letter to the people that are not in compliance?
we do as a matter of course that we intend to seek all recoverable fees and costs.
Because that could be substantially more than
what the cost is to get the meter. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Anything else before that brings us to item 21, board members' requests for future agenda items. Any requests?
I have a comment.
Please.
I believe Todd Groundwater's contract is up this year.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think we should add that to the schedule as well. That process. So you get excellent on the RFP to replace you guys. We'll need to make a decision about that too. Thanks.
Right. Thank you.
So we'll put that on the agenda, but it's not to do an RFP or an RFQ. It's to renew the contract with the board desires to go forward with that. So that would be the question, right?
I think so.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Then, is there a motion to go into closed session? Motion made by Kathy. Second by Angelica. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to go into closed session, say aye. Aye. All opposed. And just a reminder to Courtsill, Little Rock, Palmdale, Waterworks 40. We are having a meeting at noon. We're going to provide lunch for you all, and we're going to have the new president of Antelope Valley College with some of her administrative staff to talk. We're going to do a general water presentation and then talk about what the college can do to help us with our compliance courses and things like that. So you're invited if you can stay and attend, and we will have lunch for you. And anybody else who would be interested in that subject is certainly invited to. Just want to make sure everybody knew that. And then we will go into closed session. Hopefully we'll be out in about 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And then that will conclude this meeting. Thank you all for coming. And we'll see some of you soon.